like to call this meeting of the West Southwest Milwaukee School Board to order. Mr. Becker, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Sure. Pledge allegiance
And
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Sarah, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Becker?
Here.
Mr. Keller?
Here.
Ms. Carr? Here. Mr. Sikich? Mr. Burns?
Present.
Ms. Kaiser? Here. Ms. Steele? Here. Ms. Lee? Here. President Lee?
Here, proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
There are no modifications.
All right, then we're going to move right into our student showcase this evening from Dottke High School. So board members, if we can move over to the front row here.
Ooh, that must be the front.
Are we ready to go? Yes. We're ready to rock. I'm Greg Gels, the principal at Dottke Project Based Learning High School. I'm only going to talk for a few minutes because I really want to make this all about our kids, so we'll let them share out. I do want to share that I'm celebrating my 20th year as a employee of our school district. I'm very proud of that. Well, this year at Dottke High School, we've made a lot of changes and done a lot of hard work. I'm really proud of that. I wanted to also introduce a couple staff people. Riley Dietering is a new social studies teacher, and Ashley Brunette is a math teacher and also leading our sales work. So we have a lot of awesome sales stuff going on, and she's one of the key components of that. So, along with that, I did hand out our theory of action, and I was asked to kind of like connect a little bit about what our school is doing with our theory of action and how that connects with our student share of that. Okay, so I'm gonna be super brief. He goes, "What's a theory of action?" Don't worry, your teachers know. Okay, but so I used my annotation skills from graduating from Nathan Hale High School in 1992. So you'll see that there are some highlighted sheets on your desk, so you can check those out later. But basically, we are working on explicit instruction, small group work, a lot of data analysis and teacher feedback. We've really focused on making sure teachers were in their classrooms giving them feedback. It can't be better, right, without hearing about that from us. So we do that. Our theory of action, basically, and I tried to cut it down so it's quicker. It's about, you look at my own. Having clear expectations for teachers. They need that. They need to understand grade level standards and the high impact teacher strategies, right? Things that teachers can do that really show results. They need meaningful and timely feedback, which is something I'm super proud of. And Jody Landish, who's not here tonight, gave us our award, our traveling trophy 2 months ago for having the school with the most classroom observations, which I'm proud of. With only 2 administrators in our building, we were able to do that, so that's great. And then using a constant cycle of data analysis, which we're doing a lot with Corey Sachs' hard work with the Wise dashboard and having staff in our Wednesday PLCs go over all of the data of the students in their classes and what types of interventions and things that we can do to get their assessments up. So ultimately, our school wants to have all of our subgroups with a value-added score of 3 or more on next year's school report card. So we're thinking, and you can review this again later, but if we follow all of these steps that we want to do in our theory of action, we'll see those performance outcomes next year in our school report. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to introduce our awesome students. I selected 3 freshmen, and I selected freshmen on purpose. This is our first year at Dottke, where all 4 of our grade levels, 9 through 12, every student in our school has chosen to come to Dottke because they want the project-based learning experience. And I selected freshmen because I want you to see how far students can come just in one like semester of learning, project-based learning. I could have brought a junior or senior and had you see how many times they have iterated and changed and grown and how to create project deliverables. But I wanted to bring these three amazing, awesome freshmen because they have learned iteration, they have learned how to dig in, connect the ICANNs and the state standards to what they're learning every day, and then show it out in some type of a project. So every year, instead of exams, Dottke holds an exhibition night. A lot of board members and a lot of people in the room have been there. We have one in January and we have one in June. And so if I also left you a little save the date on your desks over here, so you can hopefully join us on June 10th. And anyone in the community that's listening, please come. We had almost 500 students in January, 500 guests in January. It's a huge success for us. So students got to share out what they're learning. So we're going to have Nicholas Rodriguez share out about an algebra project. And we are going to have Shane Jafuda and Lorenzo Allen share out on the social studies project. And I've given them 3 or 4 minutes each to talk about their project, and that's difficult because there's a lot of learning that went into it. But they're going to overview that and then they'll take questions. Take it away.
For algebra, we were learning multi-step equations. And for our project, we had to learn how to make them. And at the answer of the equation had to be to the corresponding hour on the clock. And because we got to choose any theme, I thought that steampunk would be nice. And I didn't think about how I would implement the numbers, which is why they branch out like this. And most of the numbers I didn't get on until probably like I think the week before exhibition night, even though I was supposed to get this done 2 months before, I think a month or two before. My while doing the math, I don't remember any of it. Don't ask me any of you. Sure. Why not? I'm being honest. You want me to be honest? I spent too much time on on all the equations, and I went 2 weeks over the due date because I put so much stuff on here. And I chose the steampunk theme because I thought it was nice. I thought it would look really nice. It looked really cool. And I went to Nathan Hale and my garage to get a bunch of different scrap materials that I can put on here. And I have a bunch of materials from Hale and some from my garage, which I would just hot glued on, paint it on to look nice. And the original project was a bare piece of wood in the back that we usually drew over or painted over. And I added a leather background so it wasn't looking all barren looking. Let's see. I think just tonight, because I wanted to add a little bit of stuff, I added this paint on here, the green paint, to make it look like aged copper. I probably should spend a bit more time on that though. That's it. My main notes. Oh no, I haven't got all the actual stuff about that. Wait a minute. With the actual making of the equations, we had to write out every equation on the paper she gave us with the rubric, so we could find our project before. And I went through a bunch of different ones because I couldn't even figure out what the equations actually equaled. And eventually I came out with this piece, which I am very proud of for how much time I struggled making this. And it made me mad today because I just had the idea of making these into what's it called? I don't remember the name of them. Make it look like they're branching out, like you're building up something, like it's being built as it's supposed to be a clock tower, and it's supposed to be the internals. But I couldn't get that done in just the few hours I had to get here. They don't have anything they want to ask?
I like that you went with steampunk. I don't know if you realized or not, like, how like the gears of a clock are very far that steampunk movement and how like the clock only moves like back in the day, like on the gears and such. And I'm just looking like algebra is not my thing, but if I had a project like this, I definitely would have been like really excited to get into like, all the ways I could make it. So I want to make it now. It's really cool.
that all? Okay. Yes,
I have a question, I have a comment. One, I appreciate your honesty. And then two, I really like actually how you're talking about how you're making all these different iterations. That was just presented right for the start out. Even now, you're still thinking about how to make this more your vision. And that's really powerful in understanding that we don't always get what we want on the first try, and sometimes it gives that a little more. So I really appreciate it.
it's the first time I've ever done something like this, and now all I want to do is make a bunch of tiny little builds like this now. I want my next like 5 projects to do this stuff, but I'm not gonna be able to. Is
I think that's awesome.
that all? Okay, thank you.
So our project was about the history of aviation in United States history from World War I to current age. Our ICANN statements are: I can construct arguments using precise and knowledgeable claims with evidence from multiple sources while acknowledging counterclaims and evidentiary weaknesses. I can gather relevant information from multiple sources representing a wide range of views. I can explain how a question reflects an enduring issue in the field. I can present arguments and explanations that feature evocative ideas and perspectives on issues, topics to reach a range of audiences and venues outside the classroom using print and oral technologies and digital technology. Good job. So, this is our main poster. Lorenzo drew it. It features 3 jets that we have here.
Quite the duration of time, especially the A10A and the whole.
Yeah, the A10A, the Lockheed AC-130, and the RB-47H. Alright, our second part was honestly the models. Our second part was these 2 models. This one was made of toothpicks and cardboard, kind of like the original. And the second. That's a great lie. The second one was 3D printed. And then our third part was the slideshow. But the original idea was 50 slides, and then it was too long, and then we cut it down like 16. Our biggest successes were how much work we put in, how much effort we put in, and just the sheer amount of like effort. We had it done by a good deadline, like a week or 2 before we get everything fully finished. Our biggest challenges were we put in so much work in one day that we got really overwhelmed the next day.
So a lot of burnout, a lot of people keeping ourselves going with the project. Finding a lot of information like we have on the slideshow and actually, trying to find what information is really difficult, especially with a project with so many different parts to it and drawings. Most in particular was one of my biggest challenges for motivation because I had to keep at it for a large portion of time on a weekend. And of course, drawing 3 aircrafts using nothing but reference images that you have randomly found off of official military site somehow on Google. It's really funny. So it did take a lot of energy and motivation. It was genuinely fun, and I am looking forward to being able to make another one of these projects at such a good skills.
That is probably it. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
This is a gargantuan topic. The history of US aviation is so huge. You said you started with 50 slides and you got it down to 16. So how did you edit? How did you determine what things to focus on and what things?
Most of it was really, really wordy, like up to 300 words a slide. So it's everything right now. It was absurd. So we only kept like the vital parts, like the start, like the timeline for World War I, the timeline for World War II, the Cold War, and the modern. That's all you really got. Anybody else?
You talked a lot about creating the project piece and the deliverable, like that's the visual
Yes.
project. But can you each share something that you learned in your studies of history of US aviation? Something that was surprising, interesting, you didn't know, like your favorite thing?
One of the more interesting things that I did learn is that nuclear bombs were used in Japan at the end War II though. But there were also numerous nuclear bombs afterwards in more peaceful quote unquote tests where animals and people and soldiers were all placed into large Navy vessels, and these bombs detonated underwater, above the water, in the water, to test how well they would work against the Navy. And while the bombs themselves did not do as much damage as anticipated, especially the tests below water, the amount of radioactive water that was in those craft was so great, they could not enter it safely for a solid that time because of the radiation being so dangerous.
My favorite fact personally was that when I was studying off planes and speed records, one plane has held the record since 1977. The SR-71, very popular plane. Fastest air breathing jet currently. It is not the fastest air vehicle though. That goes to, I think it's the Parker Solar Road now, because that thing moves up to 600,000 miles per hour. Some by NASA. Anything else? Yeah.
Sorry. It's something, no, I was just gonna say, cause it sounds like all three of you had moments where you were kind of, like struggling or were more difficult, so what was the main thing that you learned about yourself? Or that you might wanna work on as you went through this project?
Procrastination. You got the difference. These two overworked themselves and I got lazy and threw myself together in 2 weeks.
Definitely not pushing myself too hard. I can sustain it for some time, if I push myself too far, I don't realize I pushed myself too far, then I'm going to fall eventually. That is going to leave me in a pretty big crater on the ground.
Too much work in too little time.
Okay.
Too much work in too little of it.
Well, we turned over.
Yeah,
Thank
nice job.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Great work. Great job.
And the difference between really trying and throwing it together.
Except for my wife's math teacher.
I might want to clean it up then.
I went,
Right down the street.
oh yeah.
This,
You know that in your honor, as I was. That voice?
That's what he brings up in every single conversation.
Yeah, keeps you organized and keeps you focused as to what you are. Yep, it's a great system. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for the students from Dottke for coming and presenting today on their projects. And thank you to the staff and I presume the parents who brought them here as well. So one more round of applause for our group from Dottke. On to item 7 in our agenda this evening, the superintendent's report.
Good evening. We have started out with legislative updates. Governor Evers introduced the state budget. Governor Evers introduced his fourth state budget to the Wisconsin State Legislature, proposing over 3.15 billion in new K-12 education investments. The operating budget is nearly 119 billion over the biennium and over 10 billion increase compared to the current fiscal year. The budget focuses on equitable funding, mental health support, literacy improvement, and reducing financial burdens on families. Key initiatives include general equalization aid, target categorical aids, and sparsity aid. The budget also includes $300 million in expanding comprehensive mental health services, 84.6 million for improving early literacy, and 154.8 million free school meals for all students. On the last item of the 154.8 million free school meals, we talked about that during his visit to Hoover, where as a district, we've offered free meals to our students for the last 2 years. So it was very good conversation for him to engage in. He's very excited to hear that we're already doing that as a district. So money allocation for early literacy initiatives will likely revert to the surplus. Wisconsin State Rep Joel Kitchens is drafting a bill to release $50 million in early literacy funding from the Joint Finance Committee to avoid its reverting to the surplus when the deadline passes on June 30th. The Wisconsin Supreme Court agreed to hear a case to review the governor's partial veto of the appropriation bill and determine whether the Joint Finance Committee is improperly holding onto the money. However, the court has yet to schedule oral arguments in the case, and with the upcoming Supreme Court elections, it appears less likely the court will reach a decision before the deadline for the lapse of funds. $50 million was allocated to fund the mandated changes to how Wisconsin's children learn to read in 2023. Money is tied up as the legislature awaits oral arguments and a decision by the state Supreme Court on whether the governor had the authority to strike funding for school boards and charter school compliance from the law. We are very excited and anxious about the decision to be made, because right now this is currently an unfunded mandate that kind of lies over our head. So we really like resolutions to this. Let's give some shout outs this evening. A 2024 Sportsmanship Award goes to the West Allis Dogs Boys Volleyball. Congratulations to the West Allis Dogs Co-op Boys Volleyball team for being named the 2024 Sportsmanship Award recipient of the Wisconsin High School Volleyball Officials Association. The award recognizes teams that stand out for their respect, integrity, and positive impact of the game. Congratulations to Coach Meyer and the team. Nathan Hill Wrestling State Qualifier. So before I start, let me tell you something. West Allis, West Milwaukee School District is a wrestling school district. We're the winners when it comes to wrestling. Congratulations to the Nathan Hill Wrestling team who defeated Wauwatosa Co-op and Wisconsin Lutheran to claim the sectional championship. The hard work, determination, and teamwork have earned them a spot in the WIAA Team State Wrestling Tournament. So good luck at state. We're so proud of these young men and ladies for their work and effort they put in this year. We also want to highlight congratulations to Nathan Hill's Kaya Kruger on making history as the school's first ever female wrestling state qualifier. Her dedication, perseverance, and hard work have paved the way for this incredible achievement. So again, congratulations to Ms. Kruger, and good luck at state. West Allis Central Wrestling State Qualifiers. I told you we are a wrestling district. Congratulations to wrestlers Deuce Sharp, Amadi Cameron, Anthony Galvez, and Caleb Huber, who qualify for WIA State Tournament. They will compete in Madison later this week, and congratulations and good luck to those young men. Just want to also highlight out of that group, Deuce Sharp received or earned, I should say, his 100 varsity victory during the sectional finals, and so that was a double win for this young man and for their program. So again, great job to the coaches as well as the team on their achievements. Oh, we are also a cheerleading team, a cheerleading district as well. Congratulations to the Nathan Hill cheerleading team on an incredible performance at the state championship. Competing in the small all-girl non-tumble division, they finished strong, earning an impressive 3rd place overall. This achievement is a testament to their hard work, dedication, and commitment throughout the season. Way to go, Huskies. But not to be outdone, we also want to send a shout out to the West Allis Central cheerleading team on qualifying and competing at the state championship in just their 3rd season as a competition team. So again, shout out to the Husky young ladies and the Bulldogs for a job well done. Just want to remind the community on a couple of things that are coming up. We have our strategic planning that's in full effect, and so we will have our note cards going out, our information cards with surveys that will be mailed out starting on next week. We would love for everyone's input in what our next 5 years should look like as a district, as we craft and create a strategic plan that and focuses on a profile of a graduate, really would like your input. So be expecting these surveys to hit your mailbox starting on next week. The deadline for each survey will be March 21st. We also want you to participate, be a part of the decision making and giving us feedback. So we are creating a steering committee for our strategic plan. Sign up for the strategic planning steering committee. Will close on this Friday, February 28th. We have already received an overwhelming number of volunteers who want to participate, which is a great thing. We're opening it up again. We're keeping it open, I should say, till Friday, the 28th. So we're encouraging everyone to come and participate, sign up, participate, be a part of the solution and not the problem. So we're looking for a variety of opinions, feedback, as well as direction for the next 5 years for the strategic plan. Community visits, instructional rounds at Hill, West Milwaukee, Central, Irving, and Dottke. Monthly city schools meeting, West Islands Rotary Club meeting with the state representative Tenorio. Superintendent connections visits, shadowing staff and providing side-by-side coaching. And I visited Hoover, Wilson, Irving, and Franklin elementary schools during district-wide PD days. Tonight, we have our special guest sitting on as a student representative, Mr. John Gruchich. John is a senior at Nathan Hale. He's a member of the core team for Renaissance Students Leadership Team at Hale, member of the cross-country and track teams, member of the National Honor Society in Rotary. He's enrolled in multiple AP classes, and John left such an impression the last time he was here. I think they thought he was a permanent member of the board. So I just wanted to give John the opportunity to introduce himself again and talk about what's going on in Nathan Hale.
Yeah, so once again, my name is John Gruchich. It's a pleasure to be here again, seeing all these familiar faces. But you took a lot of words out of my mouth, what I was going to say. But we do have some really good sports things, which I want to expand on. So wrestling, they did take first in sectionals. That was the first time it's ever happened in 20 years. So congrats to them. And in addition to that, like as you said, that is Kaya Kruger is the first girl we've ever had in Nathan Hale history. But 4 people have also gotten over 100 varsity wins this season alone. This includes Tristan Moore, Thomas Medley, Brody Sardina, and Jay Kruger. So all of them, for the past high school careers, they've gotten 100 wins. And in addition, basketball, one of our varsity players, Wilson Shear, just recently joined the 1,000 Points Club. He's the 5th person at Hale to ever do so. Wow. So that's always nice. And not only the sports side, but the theatrical side, we have Les Marvel. Les Marvel's up and running. That's debut in April. I'm horrible pronunciation.
Les Miserables.
There's a reason I never did theater. That'll be mid-April, and right as soon as the last play was done with, they're already up with the works of it. So if you have not gone to them, I highly recommend. They are fantastic productions. And to finally finish it off, track is right around the corner, starting March 10th. An absolutely fantastic track program, and tickets are already starting to go out for early April. With that being said, on sports side and out, it's a really fun time to be at Hale.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And thank you for expounding. I knew you had more context than I had. Gave a general overview, but I'm so proud of our athletes and the things that they're doing at both high schools, not only in wrestling, but also cheering. I know basketball teams are getting ready to kick off playoffs as well. So we're excited to see both schools in their playoff runs. So thank you. My final comments this evening concern the petitions to detach from the West Islands West Milwaukee School District. Annually, citizens may petition a school district to detach property from one school district to another neighboring school district throughout the formal process. According to the DPI website, petitions for detachment and attachment of any small territory must be filed before February 1st with the clerk of the school district to which the territory is attached. At the close of business on January 31st, there were 3 detachment petitions filed, and they are as follows. Petition 1 was filed on November 15th, 2024. It included 1 parcel and 2 signatures. Petition 2 was filed on January 27th, 2025 at 9 a.m. It included 134 parcels and 116 signatures. Petition 3 was filed on January 27th, 2025 at 10 a.m. and included one parcel and one signature. Please note, these petitions are assigned a number according to the order of them being received. Following the following of the petitions, the district has the responsibility to determine the validity of the petitions based on Wisconsin statute 117.05(4)(b). During the review of the petitions, it was determined that petitions 1 and 3 met the statutory requirements and will be forwarded to the board for consideration. According to 117.12, section 3, during the month of February, each affected board must give the petitioners an opportunity to meet with the board to present reasons for the proposed reorganization before adopting a resolution, either granting or denying attachment. Petitions 1 and 3 were heard during the WAWM meeting on February 10th, 2025, which included presentations from the petitioner and questions from the board. Tonight, the district will provide a specific response to petitions 1 and 3. As far as petition 2, we have consulted with our attorney and DPI concerning the validity of the petition. At the root of the concern around petition 2 is the fact this petition contains a parcel and signatures of an aforementioned petitioner and in petition 1. Upon further review by our legal counsel and in consultation with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction attorney, we have determined that petition 2 filed on January 27, 2025 is void under Wisconsin statute 117.05(4)(b), as it contains territory proposed to be detached that is already pending in another proceeding. Simply put, the rules prohibit multiple petitions from homeowners during the same review cycle. Furthermore, DPI has determined that once a petition has been deemed as void, then it is unrevivable. That concludes the superintendent's report for tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Move on to item 8, our public comments this evening. We have a number of people sign up for public comments. I will call you up in the order that you have signed up. Just a note before we begin, each person is allowed 3 minutes for public comments. You must state your name and your address before beginning your public comments. And once your 3 minutes is up, you must stop speaking. There will be no back and forth conversation. If there is something simple that can be answered after your public comments have been completed, that might be done at the discretion of myself. Otherwise, if there's any formal response required, they'll be done by the next regular Board of Education meeting. If there's anyone in Zoom who would like to address the board, there should be a link in the chat. So with that, I would like to call up Alessandra Romero, and there's also Emily Pearson. Now, you did sign up twice. Was that on purpose? That was a mistake? Okay. All right.
Pearson and Alessandra Romero. We reside at 13605 West Wilbur Drive in New Berlin. Good evening. On January 27th, you received and signed our petition to alter the school district boundaries for 134 homes in the southwestern corner of West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District. In February 10th, I confirmed that we were not scheduled to present our request during the board meeting that day, but rather would be on the agenda for the board meeting today, February 24th. We received that formal invitation via email on February 18th. On Friday, February 21st, your executive assistant emailed us at almost 9 a.m. with a letter from your superintendent, Dr. Terrence Robinson, stating that our hearing would no longer take place as it was determined to be void since it contained territory proposed to be detached that is already pending in another proceeding. Upon receiving this letter, we attempted to rectify the situation immediately. The other sole petitioner spoke with West Dallas, West Milwaukee staff Friday morning and informed them that he was withdrawing his petition. We sent a follow-up email to your executive assistant with this information and requested that our meetings proceed as scheduled for tonight. We received a letter back from Dr. Robinson stating that the sole petition is still pending before the board for potential action tonight, regardless of that petitioner requesting to rescind their petition. According to Chapter 117 of the Wisconsin State Statute, each school board shall give the electors and owners who sign the petition an opportunity to meet with the school board to present their reasons for the proposed reorganization. Typically, these petitions are heard during the first school board meeting in February in order to allow the board sufficient time to decide and present the reasons for their decision, because according to the statute, failure of a school board to adopt a resolution before March 1st constitutes a denial of the reorganization by the school board. For this reason, we were surprised to learn that we were not on the agenda for the meeting on February 10th, but rather the meeting scheduled for today, as that would mean the board would only have a few days to make a decision regarding our request. We believed in the good faith of the district to hear the reasons for our request, but it's now apparent that our meeting was delayed for a reason. That reason being that West Dallas West Milwaukee wanted to wait until the last minute to let us know that our petition was no longer valid, which in turn denies us the opportunity to find a common solution. If we had additional time to resolve this issue, we might have found a common ground that would have allowed us to move forward with West Dallas West Milwaukee board members hearing our petition. It's clear that the way the West Dallas West Milwaukee chose to handle this was to intentionally deny us the opportunity to have our voices heard. What's unclear at this point is whether the district represents us or not, based on the way you've handled this process, a process that's designed to be fair and impartial. 94% of the households that we spoke with signed our petition. As Noah Lee stated at the last school board meeting, this process is for the students, which is exactly who we are doing this for. The 17 students in our territory attending West Dallas West Milwaukee schools and the several other students in our territory who choose to attend other schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Borelli.
Jeff Borelli, 13160 West North Lane, New Berlin. I am here to express my disappointment in the decision to void our petition. While I understand the Wisconsin state statutes, tonight's meeting should have been about a group of the school board's constituents having their voices heard. I have had experience with the district with 2 kids at Hoover. The school puts quality time and effort into their social, emotional learning resources. When they have leaders in the classroom, they provide additional resources for those kids. My oldest child had the opportunity to be a major contributor to the school store, starting the school store. Ms. Taylor was certainly qualified for Teacher of the Year, and the school does well to promote their teachers. I was proud and still am proud to have my oldest child in orchestra, where at last year's spring concert, Dr. Robinson touted the expansion of the arts in the district while others are making cuts. There are also major disadvantages for New Berlin residents to be part of West Dallas West Milwaukee. My 3rd grader thrives on sports, and there are 0 girls in her class that play sports. Behavior issues of a few led the school to ban sports at recess for 5 months, an absurd punishment that has had major impacts on my child's happiness. The teacher and principal explained that there is not enough staff to keep watch over the students. While it's great to promote teachers' achievements, there's a clear lack of investment in having enough staff at the school. While our neighbors in Waukesha County went to school on Wednesday the 12th, we were forced to find yet another childcare solution for another day off of school. My kids play in the backyard with a neighbor that will go to Muskego. A neighbor down the street sends their kids to Waukesha North, another to Whitnall. This gerrymandering, based off the needs of the communities in the 1950s, is not only impacting the 17 kids noted in the district's data. There are also at least double that number of kids in the neighborhood, and there is no sense of community without a common school. The decision by Dr. Robinson and the board to void this petition clearly shows the priorities of this district. The school board in particular is supposed to take an oath to act in the best interest of the constituents. By voiding this petition before hearing, your constituents' voices are silenced. Without facing the petition head on, it is clear that the district does not want to face the data that shows the subpar performance of the schools. That leaves the decision to be based on money and money alone. Our group has focused on the community and education of our kids. While Noah's comments from last meeting were focused on money you would lose from the New Berlin residents, a drop in the ocean, especially with the referendum passing, our group has put in hundreds of hours to put forth a fair petition based on facts. And I look forward to presenting this the next time, unless the school board steps forward tonight and upholds their oath to do what is best for their constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Majir. Apologize, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. Is there Rebecca? Here? Magier, Rebecca Majir. Lives at 13310 West North Lane. Not here? Okay, we will move on. If they show up before the end of the public comments, I'll be able to provide them still. All right, and then you signed up twice, so I'm gonna skip that one. And then Torrin Misco.
My name is Torrin Misco. I reside at 12855 West North Lane in the city of New Berlin. And I am here tonight to talk to the school board about the detachment petition of the 134 homes located in the city of New Berlin. That up until last Friday morning, we were being told was on tonight's agenda. In fact, we were asked to make sure that we provided our presentation materials in advance so that there would not be any issues at tonight's meeting. Instead, on Friday, we had the rug pulled out from underneath us. After we were notified that we were no longer on the agenda because the school district, not the school board, is considering our petition to be void due to one home with our territory of 134 homes filing their own petition for just their property. How would we know this individual filed a separate petition? We would not. But do you know who would be aware of filing the two petitions? That person that signed the paperwork twice. If anything, that person who signed those petitions twice should have their petition void, not the 134 homes that weren't even aware of it. And there was no communication by the school district up until Friday at 10 a.m. So I ask you why we were not on that February 10th meeting. It's because this has been in the works for over a month. Upon finding out about this second petition of a sole property within the 134 home territory causing issues, the property owner was immediately contacted and informed of the issue. And he immediately contacted the school district to remove his petition of his sole property so that the petition of the 134 homes could proceed. Instead of using reasonableness and discretion towards what the assistant superintendent even admitted as being a gray area of the statute open to interpretation, the school district pushed forward with their disgraceful tactics to end our petition without ever being heard by the school board. And after talking with the school board member, without even the school board's knowledge of it, until you heard from Dr. Robinson just a few minutes ago. There was a reason we were not scheduled with the other petitions on the February 10th meeting. It was because the school district was working hard in an unethical manner to silence our constituents while leading us on the entire time to ensure the issue could not be rectified in a reasonable way. If we are going to get technical with state statute under chapter 117, I'll reference 117.05 sub 8, which states the school district clerk shall give a copy of the written description of the procedures for the school district reorganizations to any person filing a petition at the time of the petition. Since we have not received this description as outlined by statute, I find it interesting how the school district will use a gray area of the statute against your constituents when they fail to follow this very black and white part of the statute. Being provided with this information may have led to us and have a reasonable conversation rectifying the issue when our petition was filed almost a month ago. I asked the school board to investigate not only what occurred, but how it occurred. Please put yourself in our shoes as our elected officials. Look into this from a reasonable person's perspective. And how would you feel if the school district treated you this way? This is not about your beliefs regarding detachment. It's about you upholding your oath. And I ask you to look at what happened here and request that you give us this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Misco.
Defend our petition as we filed it. Thank you.
Moving on. John Malling. Passing. All right. Jessica Gentile.
Good evening, everyone. My husband and I have, my name, Jessica Gentili, 13200 West Howard Avenue. Apologize. My husband and I have the same concerns as the previous families that petitioned. We recently moved to New Berlin and education was at the top of our list and our priority for our children. We were dismayed when we found out that New Berlin, or our address, fell into West Allis School District. And we were very hopeful when our petition arrived at our house that we could sign. So concerns that we have is that my son was diagnosed with ADHD and now qualifies for an IEP. His pediatrician stated New Berlin has a great special education program, and we have been told by other parents as well. We are also 9/10 of a mile from Eisenhower, and that's what concerns us the most, is that New Berlin school districts rate higher based on online resources such as Niche and Great School, Great School. Unfortunately, West Allis School District rates lower, and this is concerning for us. With that said, time for change. I was told that district lines were created in the 50s, and we are now in 2025. They need to be redrawn. New Berlin residents should have the same access to good quality education that other New Berlin residents have. Other families were annexed recently, and it would be unequitable, in my opinion, to not allow our neighborhood to be annexed. Thank you.
So I'm gonna go back to Rebecca Magier. I don't know if that person came or looking on Zoom. Don't see a Rebecca Magier. So that is all that we have signed up for public comments at this time. So I'm going to close public comments. And we'll move on to item 9, our board reports for this evening, starting with 9.1, with a review of our board calendar. So today is February 24th. We have a regular board meeting. We have a few workshops, one on AGR data review, and one on our financial stability and efficiency workshops, second Friday, pupil count, 25-26 enrollment projections, 25-26 estimated revenue limit calculation, and 25-26 preliminary budget projections. And our next meeting is on March 10th at 6 p.m. And then we have a meeting on March 17th, which is a regular board meeting, but then a final board, which will be our final board meeting at this location. So after the March 17th meeting, we'll be moving to the new location, which is at the West Side Athletic and Activity and Fitness Center, which is the former Lane location. And that that first meeting at that location will be on April 14th. So that we'll communicate that often, but just so that we're aware of that, the March 17th will be our last meeting here at this location. All right, moving on, 9.2 board committee reports. We have several. Starting with 9.2.1, employee engagement and culture. Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, or President Lee. We met last week, Tuesday on the 18th. We talked a little bit more about the substitute teachers and some of the ideas that we had discussed previously. What we determined was that Mary Ann's going to take some of that information that we had shared back to cabinet and get some feedback and additional information, and then we will revisit again at our next meeting so that we have a clear idea of what areas we can focus on again to make the substitute teaching roles a little bit more attractive. We also talked about our vacancy report, which is extremely low, just a little bit over 0.5%. So really good place right now. The final piece that we talked about was exit interviews. Shared some information about that and talked a little bit more about getting some of that data correlated a little bit better. So for instance, reasons for leaving. Like we want to know, for instance, in some cases, individuals said nothing. Like we'd like to find out what the reason for leaving was for the individuals who said that potentially there was nothing that could be done to keep them. If it was for a family reason, that makes sense, right? But we want to try to get that information correlated so that we can see if there's areas that we need to specifically focus on in order to avoid some turnover. Those were really the main things that we talked about. We're looking forward to continuing the discussions in all those areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Keller. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Keller report? Or any items to consider on future agendas? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Keller. We'll move on to item 9.2.2, financial stability and efficiency. Mr. Burns.
Sure, thank you. Financial Stability and Efficiency Committee met on February 17th. So a little bit further out, but a majority of our meeting was dealing with our unfinished business of our audit, which was obviously presented last week for everybody, so we know how that turns out. And we also have started looking into doing some new business pieces, which include looking at compensation models, and committed fund balances and where our best use of those funds is going to be as we move forward. And then also looking at just the referendum and how our implementation is coming along as far as how we have people getting to be put in positions so that we can start building our plan and getting the work done and bid it out quickly. So high level stuff right now, so nothing specific, but to be determined.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burns. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Burns regarding his report? Or any items to be considered at future agendas? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Burns. Move on to 9.2.3, recreation and community services. Mr. Becker.
I was actually unable to attend as I'm on my way back from a volleyball tournament. I'd like to defer to Mrs. Lee or Mr. Sikich to fill in.
Got it.
You got it,
Thank
okay.
you very much. Yeah. It was a pretty, the Recreation and Community Services committee met last week on the 17th also. Not a whole lot new going on. The athletic strategic plan is moving right along. And look for save the date for coming for the Rec and Activity Center's open house. Should be out soon. And that was really about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lee. Does anyone have any questions regarding Ms. Lee's report? If I remember correctly, Ms. Lee, what was the date for the athletic strategic plan to come to board and workshop? I thought that was supposed to be by the end of, is it this month or was that what the original?
We were hoping to get to February. April's what we're looking at. It was April.
Now we're looking at end of April. Okay. No, this has been, you guys have been working on this for a long time, so but we want to get it right. So it's fine to take the time so that when we come forward to the board, we have something that is going to be a little more polished, and then hopefully doesn't take much additional effort to get into full swing and implement it. So thank you for that.
I think on my part, I think I probably set the timeline a little bit too aggressively because I really did want to see it get done. I didn't want to see it fall by the wayside, and it's ended up being a bigger project than I had understood initially, I think is what it comes down to. So it may have been a bit too much.
Okay.
We definitely want to roll it out before the end of the school year.
Okay, all right, that's good. And is there any other questions about that report? Or any items to suggest for future agendas? There was one thing that I wanted to have considered when you have time, and that was investigating the potential of adding like football for girls to our schools. I know there's a lot of work. That's a loaded thing to put on a thing. There's interest and it doesn't exist right now in the state of Wisconsin, but colleges and universities are adding these teams. And so
like sport now.
Right. And so I think it would be something to look into to see, if we have interest here, and then what would be interest in the area, obviously, because we want to have teams to play against and things like that. But to start that process, I think would be great.
Absolutely.
Mr. Secretary.
That kind of planted a seed in my head. I'd like us to see have a girls basketball team at the 6th grade level for junior high.
If memory serves, I'm going to try and get a visual here from Shelley, but I believe that's a conference issue where we don't have 6th grade. I think we had that discussion in the past. Right.
Kids play.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's an intramural program though.
There should be something for them with a basketball.
Oh, believe me.
Anything else? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Becker. We'll move on to 9.3 board member reports of community events. Any community events where members attended that they would like to report on? Yes. Ms. Kaiser?
I know others will bring it up as well, but I did get to stop by the PTA Carnival on Sunday. It was really wonderful to see so many families coming in the door. There were some amazing raffle prizes in the silent auction and just a big shout out to our PTAs. We have an amazing PTA program in our district that does a lot for our kids and including scholarship. So thank you to everyone who came out. Oh, and Peter Pan is this week. Peter Pan tickets are this week. They are February 27th, 28th, and March 1st and 2nd. You never want to miss one of our shows. They're fantastic.
Thank you much, Ms. Kaiser. Ms. Lee?
I was able to make the unified basketball game at Hale against Cedarburg, which is always just, you can't help but smile while watching these kids play basketball. It's just the warm, fuzzy feeling is unavoidable. So it was a great time, a great turnout. So I look forward to next year's.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Lee. I'll have to come back to you.
Yeah,
Ms. Kaiser. Ms. Card, I believe you had.
I did also attend the PTA Carnival yesterday and, you know, being in the district for as many years as I have, I saw it for 30 years. We've been doing it. I mean, it has just been a thing and every year I marvel. And I'm always so interested the fact that, they come up with new games all the time. I mean, they're not just the same carnival games or, you know, the same stereotypical. There was a Wicked game for, you know, based on the movie that came out. And I just thought that the PTA really puts their heart and soul into that. And I think it helps just create such memories for our kids. And so I really enjoyed it. I did even bring my 18-month-old granddaughter for the first time and just to expose her to something like that. And it was delightful.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carr. Anyone else want to report? Mr. Becker?
Right on the way over here tonight, I went to the FLW 8th grade girls volleyball games. A lot of interest around the sport right now. They've got 2 full teams and they could probably field a third. So it's really nice seeing the players develop from where they were last year to running some a little more complicated rotation style volleyball. So hopefully preparing them for a strong team on the high school level.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, well, as we've already heard, I was also able to be at the PTA Carnival, which was always, as I said, fantastic event. I like to see the kids out and, you know, I get the bonus of having a couple of young kids that are doing some of the activities as well. So fun with that. And I was also able to make it over to the Battle of the Dogs for the girls, watch them work their hearts out and you know, really compete against one another. So that was a really good game to go see as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Burns. Anyone else want to report on events that they attended? All right, I'll wrap it up. I also was at the PTA Carnival. I often am asked to do the 50-50 raffle, and so I'm walking around yelling for 50-50 raffle, but we're able to make some money for the PTA scholarship fund as well. So we can have some deserving students to be able to get some scholarships to help with their next steps in their lives. I was able to catch the last part of the unified game and then stayed for the Battle of Dogs game as well to be able to watch Central and Hale face off against each other for girls basketball. My son is a wrestler, so I've been involved in all the wrestling that's been going on. I just wanted to mention, and I'm sure Dr. Robinson was going to mention this next week, but there were beyond the 4 individual wrestlers who made it to individual states. So wrestling has a team component and an individual component, and so they're 2 separate competitions. And so the team component, as Dr. Robinson mentioned, for Hale, they're going as a team. Central has 4 individual wrestlers going in the individual competition. And then Hale also has 9 individual male wrestlers that are going, and then the female wrestler that Dr. Robinson already mentioned also going is competing individually, so within their weight class versus having the scoring like the whole team would do. So I just want to mention those the 9 wrestlers. I don't have all their names right in front of me, so I don't want to miss anybody, but I'm sure they'll be mentioned in our next meeting next week. Yes, the 10th. Yep. Yeah, so we'll have the rest of the teams here within the Ms. Kaiser.
My question actually bounces off of yours. Is there gonna be any way for us like to watch? Like, is there a
Yes.
Zoom? Because I would love to be able to watch.
Yes,
Cheer on our kids.
they do broadcast the state competitions that they're in Madison, but they do broadcast them so you can watch them. I can get that information and distribute it to the board if
Thank
people
you.
are interested. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Right. And that kind of covers my other information items as well for 9.4. So we'll move on to our consent agenda this evening, starting at 10.1, approval of minutes from our regular Board of Education meeting on February 10th and our board workshop from February 17th. 10.2, our employment summary. 10.3, our supplementary contracts, and 10.4, our financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated out? If not, I would look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. I'll move to our action items this evening. Our first one, 11.1, the Pat Connaughton Foundation Grant Acceptance. I only see Ms. Strasser, so I guess she will be taking this one. Oh, what long
Here,
dog
let
rub.
me do the fun stuff. So, good evening, board. We are here tonight to seek approval from the board, to accept on behalf of the district, allow district administration on behalf of the district to accept the grant from the Pat Connaughton Foundation through Connaughton Courts. Those that I don't like to assume, for those that may not be aware, Pat Connaughton is a member of our Milwaukee Bucks. And we've been awarded, we applied back in September. We're all aware of some of the challenges we face at West Dallas Central and the Field House. So their program provides new wood courts, and in a dollar amount, of $125,000. So, asking approval though based on dollar amount, and then there comes some, stipulations with it, some logos, so some naming rights along with board policy. And they would also have the first right of refusal if the district would ever choose to refurbish the court. They would like to be involved with it at that time. So, very exciting. We applied back in September and have been waiting very anxiously, and found out last Thursday from one of the members of the foundation board that our grant was chosen.
Fantastic. Super. And I just want to thank the committee, myself, Shelley, Aaron, and Connie. Connie was on that committee as well. We got together over a month's time span in August, and we divided it up. Each person had a section. My section was the best of all. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. That's a joke. That's a joke.
I think he inserted a picture.
No, yeah, exactly. No, this was when I tell you, when we submitted the grant, we said to ourselves, there is no way we're not getting this. It was that good. It was that good. It met the expectations. It exceeded the expectations. And it also included a lot of work on the front end and just really being transparent and letting them know how bad the problem was as far as the court is concerned. And we also thanking the coaches and the players of Central. They were involved in really telling the story and the need for the court. So we're excited, very excited.
Questions from the board? Ms. Carr.
So I think Shelley or Aaron might be able to answer this. So obviously with the referendum, we had some monies earmarked for working on the field house at Central. And I'm wondering would we use this money? This is in addition, or would we take some of the money that we had earmarked and move it to somewhere else that might need it? Or can you explain what the thinking is behind that?
Yeah, so we, as part of the grant, we had to submit a budget, right? Because in addition to the flooring, we know the bleachers, and there's a few other things, sound systems. So this would kind of replace the referendum and budget money. So we would have additional dollars either to do more improvements at the field house or to reallocate to other projects throughout the district.
And I guess that's my question. Like, we wouldn't decide that tonight. We're just gonna.
No, we wouldn't.
But down the road, we could
That would
decide
be extra
where
money
we.
that we can use in other places. That's
Okay.
correct. With the waterproof.
Got it.
So once we get down the road of picking the projects and that sort of stuff, and then when we've obviously there's bidding, there's like a lot of things that have to happen.
Sure.
But once we get down to the actual dollar amount, then we can say, okay, we budgeted this much. We have 125,000 from the Connaughton Foundation. So did it cost more? Did it cost less to do what we were going to do originally? And then if it costs the same or less, then what do we want to do with those funds? And that would be a decision the board would make at that time. for that
Okay,
purpose.
thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Becker?
I was gonna say, I saw, noting that there's no objections to the logos and the organization's names, things like that. I just kind of wonder in general if this will generate a little more appetite for sponsorship. I think there's been some conversations on that over the last couple of years, and I can't remember specifically why, but I think there were objections to that. So hopefully that's a thing of the past, and we can build some similar kind of relationships.
Yeah, and included in the exec summary, there's I think it was labeled Exhibit A. There's an example of what kind of those logos look like and the placement of them.
Any other questions? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. And thank you to the Connaughton Foundation for selecting our application. All right, we'll move on to 11.2, 23-24 annual financial statements and audit report. Mr. Norris.
Thank you so much. Let me just get settled quick here.
Oh, okay.
So the audit approval is an annual item the board is tasked with, both receiving from our auditors, at Baker Tilly, and then also, the following meeting approving that final audit for to conclude the fiscal year 2024. So again, I just want to recap, starting here as an educator, working through being a principal in the schools, working through some of the challenges we had over a decade ago. It is really a capstone on the organization's financial stability from the board's perspective, from the administration's perspective, really coming out of back-to-back audit cycles with no findings, with only the one material weakness in the sense that Baker Tilly provides and prepares the financial statements, which is the case for 80+% districts in the state of Wisconsin. So I just want to say I appreciate the board's involvement. I think we've established over the better part of 8, 9, 10 years a good process that comes with great outcomes financially, conservative budgeting, as well as really projecting our enrollment, which is our revenue, and then aligning our staffing, which is the largest expense in the budget, to those projected enrollments. So to me, it's a great celebration the board and the administration has, and I think looking for continued support in the process. And I guess from that, I would pause for any questions you might have.
Any questions from the board? And there's no changes from what we saw from the workshop last week.
No changes.
And this is the second year we've had no material findings other than the not preparing our own financial statements.
That's correct. Yeah, back-to-back years. Yeah.
Yep.
And if you can recall, not to go back too far, but 5 or 6 years ago, we had double digit. And so an audit finding or an audit process is really a way for the board and the community to get a sense of are the processes in place to assure the money is being, budgeted, booked, allocated into all the appropriate funds as outlined to the school board every year. And that's exactly what that does. They certainly don't dig into every single corner, every pocket every year, but every single year they have different pots. She mentioned that this year they focus on federal grants. Last year they didn't. And so it allows them to really give their, unsolicited opinion of kind of the state of the district finances. On top of that, through the referendum funding, as we sought community approval for the facilities, you guys also were able to see another good financial metric, which is our credit rating, which went up. That's another good marker. So I kind of always say that school district finance is no different than personal finance. So your credit rating is a reflection of your financial state. No different with school districts as well. So.
Very good. Any other questions or comments?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. All right, we'll move on to 11.3, request to alter school district boundaries. Dr. Robinson, Mr. Norris. Are you gonna take them one at a time?
Yeah, you want to open it up there?
Yeah, so tonight we're gonna go one by one. We're gonna talk about the petitions and respond to them that were heard on February 10th. And as I noted earlier, we did hear 2 petitions from single parcels. And so we're going to go to that tonight, and then we'll ask the board to make a vote on the following our
resolution. So really quick, what we'll do is we'll go through some historical background. We'll review a quick timeline. Not that that's new for anyone on the board or anyone likely in the room. And then we'll get into each petition specifically. As I get to petition 2, in order that Dr. Robinson said, some of the administration's perspectives aren't going to change. And so I won't go through that twice for the sake of time. But if there's questions, certainly you'll have a time to ask questions for each petition. And then at the end, as Dr. Robinson said, there'll be a recommendation and then the ability for the board to ask questions, ultimately to approve a resolution as the board sees fit. So again, a quick timeline. I think you kind of heard this from Mr. Mulling and Mr. Loma as well, but kind of I think interesting background here. So 1947, the Milwaukee County School Committee formed to consider school district consolidations in and around Milwaukee County. In 1954, 7 years later, the West Allis Common Council annexed territory from the town of Greenfield, which included the school district Parkway and Johnson. And in 1954, same year, like a week later almost, or a little bit less, the city of West Allis annexed the town of Wauwatosa, the territory of LaFayette and Lane school districts. Later that year, the Milwaukee County Committee received a petition signed by 154 as in Berlin portion of the Parkway School District requested the portion of Berlin that was known as Parkway to be permitted in the West Allis system at the time. West Allis officials voiced opposition to this, including the position of Berlin Waukesha on the West Allis school system. At that time, it was the whole consortium. After much discussion, the county committee took action. A motion was made to consolidate the joint district. And I think it's important that while obviously this goes back 50, plus years, decisions get made over 50 years to uphold those decisions of the past. So while this decision may be dated in some people's perspectives, the school district's been tasked with maintaining and educating the students in those areas for, that amount of time. So that comes with maintaining school buildings, that maintains things like, at Hoover Elementary, things like that. So I think it's important to note that. This is a quick overview of the timeline. That's not super important, but I just wanted to have this in here. So petitions are able to be filed up until February 1st. There's other statutory requirements we haven't discussed, but having a majority of electors or owners, 50% or more. And then in February, petitioners are allowed to present their case, and March 1st, that is the deadline for the board to issue a decision. And then there's an appeal deadline and then a reorganization deadline by DPI. So in the Wisconsin statute 117, 115, school boards may consider the following when reviewing potential small territory petitions. These are the criteria. I will not go through them right now. We'll hit on each one of them as it relates to each petition. And again, some may be overlap, so I won't go through them twice. First petition, Mr. John Mulling, presented on the 10th. This is for one parcel, 2 owners. Total owners who signed are 2. Total electors in the territory are also 2. 0 school-age children. Assessed value of $490,600. And in the school district, you can see kind of a quick map in green, shows you the area in where that property resides in relation to the whole school district. Criteria 1, geographical and the topographical. I'm going to butcher that a couple of times. Apologies. Characteristics of this effective school district, including the estimated travel time. Essentially, the question for criteria 1 is the property closer to the district that they're looking to reorganize to? That's the question. So for this, what we do is we look at if a school-age child was to be in that home from when they were in kindergarten up until then when they were a senior, what would that look like to each school? Okay. So from the address to Hoover, it's about 1.6 miles. From the address to Franklin at 3.6 and to Hale 3. And you can see to Orchard Lane 3.1, to Eisenhower 3.3, and to Eisenhower High School the same, right? So the question is if you look over the amount of days that a student would be in school, you can provide an annual travel distance from the home to the school.
You passed an audit with this. Sorry. I'm sorry. There's no questions at this.
So the total driving time per day at 171 days for the elementary at West Allis, we have 171 days for elementary students is 273.6 miles. For the middle school, 626. You can get the idea. It's multiplied out. And then in New Berlin, for the elementary, middle, and high school, the multiplication is the number of days in their school calendar. So over the course of a career, over the 6 years you'd spend in elementary in West Allis versus 7, et cetera, you can see that the total miles from their home to the school over a career, a K through 12 career, is actually greater going to New Berlin than to West Allis. So that's criteria 1. Criteria 2 is on the educational needs of all children residing in the effective school district's educational programs currently offered by each effective school district, and the ability and commitment of the school district to meet those needs and continue to offer those educational programs. So I think it's interesting that I think, this didn't directly come up in the petition, but, there's been enough comments either through the petitioner's presentation, as well as previously around the school district's academic performance. And so that's really what this criteria is about. And I just want to hit on this because when you compare the West Allis, West Milwaukee School District to the New Berlin School District, in terms of state report cards academically, that really isn't, in my opinion, a fair metric to compare. Because what the real comparison should be is how do students who live in New Berlin but are attending West Allis schools, how do those students score versus students in New Berlin? To me, that's the insinuation. We want to petition our property out of your district because students don't score well. But really, it should be how do students who live in New Berlin that go to our school district score versus students in New Berlin? Because how does a student score that lives in West Milwaukee? The conditions of that family might be very, very different. So let's compare apples to apples. To me, that's the more reasonable snapshot. So I didn't go through all of them. There's 1,000 ways to look at academic scores, but I took state assessments and different criteria to show you a quick snapshot. So you can see here, this is from 23-24, the most recent report card for ELA forward exam. Okay, that's a 3rd through 6th exam. For students at Hoover, 3 through 5, plus 6th grade is FLW, you can see it's very obvious that students in that grade band are not scoring as high as students at Orchard Lane, right? 43% proficient in advanced at Hoover and FLW versus 65% at Orchard Lane. If you compare the New Berlin students at Hoover, you can see it looks very, very similar to students at Orchard Lane. Again, how are students living in New Berlin that attend our schools scoring? Not a major difference there to me. 7th and 8th grade, ELA. WWM, FLW, 7th and 8th grade, okay? You can see 40% proficient in advanced. Again, if you look at this at a 360 view and go, let's just look at just that and step away. Yeah, it's very obvious that students at FLW compared to students at New Berlin West, just 2 examples, are not scoring as high. But if you go, how are students that are in New Berlin that go to FLW scoring? I would agree, not as high as students in New Berlin West in 7th and 8th grade, but much more comparable. And again, that's the point. ACT, ELA, ACT Aspire, this is for 9th and 10th graders who are currently in 10th and 11th grade. Again, if you compare Nathan Hale High School, again, 41% proficient in advanced. But if you look at New Berlin students attending Hale in those grade bands, 63% compared to 66%. Again, this is just comparing the actual groups of students. How are students in New Berlin scoring versus students in New Berlin? That to me is the comparison. Again, similar story here, ACT and Math Aspire. Again, I won't go, it's redundant, but 69% of students at New Berlin, at Hale, who are from New Berlin, are scoring at 69% versus 71%. So again, much more closer apples to apples. This would not be a conversation if this was the comparison district to district. And the last thing I want to point out here is when you look at the economically disadvantaged percentage here, the school district in 23-24, West Allis School District had 65% of students economically disadvantaged. When you look at the students in New Berlin who are attending our schools, about 1/3 of those students living in New Berlin attending our schools are economically disadvantaged. If you compare that to the New Berlin School District, it's 15%. The facts are that a student in West Allis schools is almost 4 times as likely, 4.5 times as likely to be economically disadvantaged. So when you start to ask yourself, well, why is West Allis' report card much worse than New Berlin's? This is a evident reason why. Move on. Criteria 3. If the territory is proposed to be attached to one school district to another and attached to a joining school district, whether the proposed attachment will have an adverse effect on the program currently offered by the school district, both from a programming and curricular aspect. So I do want to talk about briefly here the snowball effect. So we have received a increase in these petitions since the 160 was approved by the DPI boundary appeal board. And in a glance, you might argue or might say, well, one property isn't going to move the needle here. And I would likely agree with that. But the reality is the more of these that are approved, once you open the door, the more you're going to get. And the truth is, if all of New Berlin was annexed, that would have a significant impact on our school district. 161 properties, 160 plus this one would be over $40.5 million in property value. That's nothing to sneeze over. Now, I know compared to our whole district total equalized value, that isn't a large percentage, but the reality is, people in this community shouldn't have to bear that burden for people to leave the school district. So that would have an adverse impact. I just showed the class sizes here, pretty comparable from WWM to New Berlin, about 22 for an elementary on average. Criteria 4 is testimony and written statements filed by the residents of the affected school district. So the petitioner on his presentation 10 cited a few different testimonies. He stated, in summary here, he lives in New Berlin, thus his property should be attached to the Berlin School District. I'm paraphrasing, okay? He referenced conversation with prior board member and their opinion in the matter. Inability to sell his home given the schools of residence. Referenced students who live in the neighborhood associate with other kids but are unable to attend the same school district. And lastly, stated that nearly all owners in the Berlin are trying to get out of the school district. Those are kind of a summary. If I may have missed some, I can certainly clarify if there's any follow-up from the board on that. So number one, the petitioner's property is located in New Berlin. The petitioner argued that since their property resides in the city of New Berlin, that it should be attached to the New Berlin School District. Additionally, just want to make a note that his property resides in Waukesha County and the West Dallas School District is in Milwaukee County. And the argument is that that's suitable enough evidence to have the property detached. But the facts are there are over 100 school districts in the state of Wisconsin where they serve multiple counties. The petitioner's experience is shared with thousands of residents all across the state of Wisconsin. To give you a few, Union Grove services Kenosha and Racine, Muskego, Norway, Waukesha and Racine, Oconomowoc, Waukesha, Jefferson, Dodge, Kewaskum, Washington, Fond du Lac, Sheboygan, Random Lake, Ozaki, Sheboygan, Campbellsport, Fond du Lac, Sheboygan, Lamira, Dodge, Fond du Lac. I can keep going. There's over 75 more I'm not listing here. That's the county argument. That wasn't his argument. Well, the reality is the city of New Berlin also services 3 different school districts. They service New Berlin, they service Elmbrook, they service West Dallas, West Milwaukee, West Dallas, West Milwaukee. So when we talk about why don't all people living in New Berlin get to go to Berlin schools, why doesn't Elmbrook give the property back too? I don't know. That's a good question, right? I don't know. That's not the reality. It's not the current situation. So to me, that's not a reasonable argument. Conversation with a prior board member. I would just add to that all constituents have the ability to provide public comment on the matter. We'd welcome and provide them an opportunity to be heard. No different than any resident. I think that's a thing that we'd offer anyone. The petitioner stays unable to sell his home due to the school district residence. To me, the only thing to consider here is that all the people that are petitioning to leave bought their homes in the school district. That has not changed. To me, it shouldn't be the government that steps in to move people's properties. This is up to them to decide. This is their school district of residence. And they, like anyone else, could choose to move if they wanted to. That's just the reality. Students who live in New Berlin and attend the school district score nearly the same as any student in New Berlin. That's what we presented as well. The last one, the petitioner made remarks that students living in the neighborhood get to know and play with students who aren't able to go. One of the things I'd say here is that this is one of the key intents behind open enrollment, is that students can pick and choose. We heard that from a public comment tonight that a lot of families pick and choose which district they want to go to. That's an option from the state. The other thing I would note is that when you live on the edge of a school boundary, just in essence, if you live on the boundary of a school district, which is the case because all school districts have boundaries in the whole state, by and large, you're going to have students who, I guess, associate with the neighborhoods of students who live down the street who might live in Greenfield. Or if you live on the edge of Shorewood, Milwaukee, you might have, or Fox Point Base. This exists everywhere. So by the board considering a reorganization, you're just moving the line. So to me, you would just extend that problem or that conversation to someone else. So I don't see how that, to me, is a reasonable argument. And then the final one, the petition say that all residents living in New Berlin want to leave the school district. So to me, I find that this is an interesting one. So again, I know you've heard this before. In 23, the school district lost 160 parcels from small territory to the New Berlin School District. Of that 160 parcels, at that time, this was in the spring, right? There were 25 students living at 12 parcels. So let me just back up. 160 parcels, 148 didn't have kids, okay? 12 had students. The following year, we lost 2 students because they graduated, so now you're down to 23. Of the 23 students, if this is really about kids, why didn't all 23 enroll in New Berlin schools? In fact, 14 of the 23 enrolled in West Dallas schools. So you look at those numbers, 148 people had homes without school, without kids, and 12 didn't. And of that, the 14 students came back. You can't look at that and tell me this is about kids. It's not. Out of the 160, only 100 and they had 103 signatures on that petition. So the reality is, based on this petition, that isn't the case. Not all families want out of New Berlin. Okay, or out of our school district from New Berlin. Fiscal impact of the proposed reorganization. So this is just a quick overview of how the 4 municipalities that make up our school district, how those properties attribute to the total equalized value of the district. Let me just break this chart down a bit. So the average home value for West Dallas is about 235,000. But if you multiply that over all the parcels, the largest portion of our school is West Dallas. So it makes up roughly 86.5% of the equalized property value, right? West Milwaukee, you can see property value a little bit lower. And total, there's less parcels there, so that's less of a total EPV, about 7%. A small portion of Greenfield, less than 1%. And New Berlin, average home value is that. Total equalized value, about 5.5%. So my point here is this really paints a nice picture. Is the further east you go in our district, the more property poor we are. The further you go west, the more property rich we are. So it's just the truth. It's just a fact. Okay. If the board, under the fiscal criteria, was to consider allowing people in the furthest west region of our district, who also happen to be the most property rich portion of our district, to leave, it would simply stick the tax bill, as big or small as it is, to the people in this community that have the least. So I want you to think about that. Was that the intent of this law? To me, it's not. I want to go back. When the petition of 2023 was filed, it is a fact. The West Dallas School District's mill rate was less than New Berlin's, 655 to 689. At the time, the New Berlin portion of the property value was almost 7%. Now it's down to 5.5. Okay. Now, if you look at 23, 24, and 24, 25, you might wonder, well, I wonder why West Dallas's mill rate went higher. It's higher than New Berlin's now. Well, it has everything to do with $40 million of property being pulled from the school district and reattached to New Berlin. So New Berlin does have a cheaper mill rate by the difference of today from 661 to 589. But the reality is, if the entire portion was to go, that would be $393 million of property value. What do you think is going to happen on this slide that happens? New Berlin's mill rate will plummet and ours will go up. And the people that will have to pay in our district can afford the least, and the people in New Berlin that will get a tax break can afford the most. It's just the truth. You can see here, our mill rate had 2% increase, and New Berlin's the following year had a 14.8% decrease with the property addition to their district. So again, the snowball effect is the issue here. It's not about the one property to me. It's about the larger scope. You open the door, you leave it open, you're going to get more requests to do
Do you guys mind? Thank you.
Criteria 6, it's the discussion about if the territory is considered non-contiguous. You can see here, this is a quick snapshot of the petitioner's property. Hard to see, I know, but in red, there's a little dot there with an arrow. And I want to show you too, there's an interesting island that was created in 23 because of the reorg, because decisions like this we aren't able to edit those territories. So it is possible, and it did happen, where a petition comes through that isn't inclusive of all the properties. And now you have an island territory in our school district that's completely isolated from the whole school district, but yet is required to go to our school district. And if you read the statute, it references that island properties are not excluded from this process. So that's also something to consider too. Because if this were to be approved, you would have a hole in that region. You see what I'm saying here? Okay. Socioeconomic level, we won't spend too much time on this. This is kind of a quick snapshot. I referenced the 33% of the 172 students who live in New Berlin attend our schools, 33%. You can see here the economically disadvantaged percentage from West Dallas to New Berlin. This is kind of the racial breakdown here. So New Berlin students that attend our school district, about 68% are white versus the whole school district, 43.5%, and New Berlin of 77.5. And you can see the corollary different demographic groups there. Students' disabilities, we have more students in the school district with disabilities versus New Berlin. And then that portion of New Berlin students attending our schools is kind of in the middle represented, just kind of some district facts here. This is a table that shows this. So in summary, again, this goes back to the snowball petition. The petitioner that presented certainly doesn't have students in school. But again, this is about the larger picture to me. And this is my argument here. Is if this were approved and all were approved, it would mean that the school district of West Dallas, West Milwaukee would have a higher percentage of students from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds on a percentage basis, would become less white, have a higher percentage of student disabilities, and become more property poor. That's just the truth, and the opposite would be true in New Berlin. Criteria 8, results of referendum, something else to consider. So from 2019 to 2023, the New Berlin School District and West Dallas School District both had the same amount of referendums posed. Both were denied. I referenced the years there. Now in 2024, the West Dallas School District did go to community support for operating capital. Both were supported by the community. Some people might argue that that wasn't the wish of the voters in New Berlin. And when the school district taxpayers voted over an overwhelming support for both questions, this includes New Berlin residents. So I want to show you that vote and what that looks like. So you can see here in New Berlin, how did those votes shake out? I think it's interesting. So for staff compensation, the referendum would not have passed if it was just in New Berlin. But we're looking at, it was really, really tight. The facility one did actually pass in New Berlin. So again, this goes back to, are people living in New Berlin who are in our school district supportive of our schools? This paints a very different picture than you've heard here tonight. If people in New Berlin really want it out, this should be whatever percent you could dream up. For certainly a no, but it's not. So I want you to consider that in your decision. Other factors here, just kind of other things to consider. Fund balance, the school district of West Dallas and New Berlin, both have really healthy fund balances. Certainly no argument here about the management of funds in New Berlin. They do a great job. I think we do too. The total, again, the snowball here, should the petition be approved and the snowball effect continue to happen, like what would that mean for us? We have 172 kids now. Those are resident students who attend our schools. If you take our per pupil, multiply that out, it's about $2 million in total revenue. And then there are students who are living in New Berlin, as referenced tonight, who open and roll out. Now, that's not a net 100% loss. For every dollar that a student open and rolls out, we retain about 20% of that, roughly. And so you can see it's about $90,000 there. So if you add those together, you get to about 2.1 million. That number will change as we get new students or students age out, but today that's what that looks like. And then again, about 390 million of property value, both significant figures. That would be if the whole territory of New Berlin was annexed out. Okay. Open enrollment, we've discussed this. This is really an option for school districts to participate. There's also the parental choice program, the voucher program, homeschool. I mean, there's a lot of options here, all things that families can consider. I did want to show the open enrollment numbers. So New Berlin, this is the years in the far left column. The middle column is the number of seats approved by the New Berlin School District. And you can see outside of 2021, which was likely a response to the failed referendum. I'm not positive on that. I have to rewatch some board meetings. That's my guess. They opened 30 seats. In the ancillary years, it's been 0. And I say that because there has been families that have applied that live in New Berlin to leave, right? And to go to New Berlin. But when there's no seats open, there's not an option, right? So that's unfortunate, but I would have to, push the New Berlin to consider something like that, because that is an option that other districts do in the area. So the Wisconsin statute, the question here, and this is just an opinion, I suppose, but in my opinion, this Wisconsin statute, which is written by legislative body, is administered by certain departments. And this was given to the Department of Public Instruction because it's about students. So to me, when you look at the previous petition, which was 160 properties and 140 didn't have kids, and the two you're hearing about today don't have kids, I'm just questioning the basis for these petitions if it's about students. So to me, this is really more about taxes and people being displeased with that, you know, or selling our home, right? All decisions that were made at the time of purchase. It's really should not be the intent of a government body to make an adverse decision for someone who made a decision. And we talk about accountability of a school district. What about the accountability of the person who bought the home? So again, not to go through these again, I kind of created a chart. To me, all of the criteria support denial. The only one you could maybe argue is non-contiguous because the property in definition is considered non-contiguous, but would create a hole in our attendance area. So that's that. So my recommendation, along with Dr. Robinson, is the board consider approving a resolution denying a petition to attach approximately 1 land parcel from the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District et al. And attach the property to the New Berlin School for the reasons presented. So with that, I would pause for questions.
Questions from the board?
Can we go back to the distance? Cause I thought I saw 3 miles for the school and I took a quick glance from Mr. Mulling's address. It looked like it was 1.5 miles to the middle school and high school. But I think it makes the point even stronger because it's 3 miles to the elementary school. And I'd take a show of hands, anybody who was going to walk their 4-year-old 3 miles to school versus the half mile to Hoover.
Which one's inaccurate? I can check that. Thanks for catching that. Whoever did that.
Eisenhower.
I thought it was 1.5 miles. I think it may have been a round trip there.
So from the property of question to Eisenhower is 1.5 miles. That's the question. Okay.
So I can't, I just, again, I pulled up his address.
One way or round trip?
I saw one way. Was it round trip?
So one way is 1.5 miles. Is this round trip or one way?
I believe I'd have to double check. I didn't prepare all of this, but I'd have to check. Yeah.
I believe it's one way or
I believe it's round trip.
Oh, you better round trip. Round trip, it's probably close.
So I thought Hale was further, but you know, again, bottom line, I think that elementary school is the one makes the big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions? So just so we're all clear, the vote is to deny the petition. Just for aware of that. So I look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things that I just have to ask about. So, Aaron, you said that New Berlin doesn't have open enrollment seats.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So,
In the most recent years, yes.
Yeah.
Outside of that 1 year. Yeah.
so my thinking on this, when I listen to you and I see that, you know, your recommendation, there was only one that might have some legs. And I listen to it, I say, in good conscience, I'm not going to be able to vote yes to a detachment. I mean, that's obvious to me. But what isn't obvious to me is when you have people that are part of our community and they are wanting us to work with them, how can we make that happen? So have you thought about, or as Dr. Robinson, have you guys thought about any way that we might work with them to help them in any way? Before the meeting, what did we talk about? Was there anything that you thought that maybe we could do to help them? Or to be...
Yeah, I mean, not to get down the road, but I don't know.
Yeah, this is a little bit outside of the purview of this agenda item, Jane. We're looking at specifically this petition and this particular decision. So I understand what you're getting at, but I think I don't know if there's anything in particular with Mr. Malling that you felt that we needed to.
So it's just that particular, but again.
It's just that petition that we're considering right now, yes.
We can maybe speak broadly at the end. Like.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to the open enrollment question. During a previous petition, the DPI, the appeal at DPI last year, I made a point to make to the panel. And I asked the gentleman from New Berlin, did they have open enrollment? He said, confidence, no. So the point of me asking that particular question is because if it's really about educational opportunities and you want these kids to attend, then why don't you have open enrollment so these kids can attend?
Right.
And I wanted that for the record, and so that panel could understand what we're talking about. We're really not talking about educational opportunities right now. We're talking about something different, and that was the point I was trying to make.
And I guess I understand that we're really not talking about the other petition, but in my mind, when I'm looking at this, and I think the beef isn't with us, I think the beef should be with New Berlin. I mean, I think that they should open those seats for them. If that's what, but they're not. And, I just feel like we're not going to change. And I don't think the beef should be with us then.
So we do have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes.
Okay.
Move
A
on
couple
to-
other points to make here. We'll kind of go through this quickly and
Okay.
then maybe you can address your question, Ms. Carr, if it's appropriate. So Mr. Lohman's petition, again, similar format here, just kind of go through the property where it's located, the assessed value, number of collectors, geographical information here. So this is kind of the same snapshot, amount of miles annualized, and then the amount of miles over the career, kind of a similar story. I can double check that if it's a sticking point, I can check that as well with the finance team for an error there. Criteria 2 is same content we provided before on the educational programming. That's really the argument or the disposition of how students who live in New Berlin score academically versus students in New Berlin. Number 3 is the same content rationales provided before regarding the extracurriculars and curriculum. That's going to be the class sizes we showed. Testimony. So a couple of things here I want to show you. So the petitioner cited a few things: higher academic performances. He talked about facilities, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then taxes. So testimony, one we've addressed that students in New Berlin who attend our schools versus students attending New Berlin School District, it's very comparable in academic nature. Number 2, this is interesting. So the petitioner had said that one of the reasons he thought it would be the reorg might make sense is because of the facilities, and I think that is probably a fair comment that New Berlin likely has nicer facilities than us. That was one of the reasons we went to referendum in 24 is to put some money into some of the schools. Likely it's not, or it will not rebuild them into be these state-of-the-art facilities, but we're going to take care of a lot of facility needs. But I do want to point something out is that New Berlin received this past year $12,325 per kid. And we received $11,402. Now, you might say, well, that's a little bit less than $1,000, Aaron. What are we talking about? But if you look at this just in a silo, you're going to get just a silo response. And this is not, facilities aren't, rebuilt in 1 year. Now they could be with a lot of money, but this is ongoing. Us receiving less funding than New Berlin, an area district, which is part of the campaign of the referendum, is ongoing for years. So I said, well, what does that look like if you go back to 2000? And, you take inflation into consideration, $7 million this year would be the difference. We would receive roughly $7 million more this year had we received that same level of funding. But if you look back over 23 years, get 2000, that's $275 million looking at the number of students we've had from there to then, roughly, right? And that's an amount of money that you look at facilities. What would that have gotten you in 2000, 2001, 2002? I mean, these are the reasons. It's nothing else. So when the state system is not set up to support all schools, this is what happens. This is what happens. And this has been the case since really Governor Thompson left office, because this is what happened. And so this is the truth. You could point to other reasons, but hard to ignore $275 million of lost revenue there. We talked about the fiscal impact from a tax perspective before. Criteria 5 is the fiscal effect on the proposed reorganization. Contiguous, it's kind of the same situation. The petitioner's property is not directly on the border, so you could argue it is non-contiguous, but will also create a hole in the map. And then criteria 7 is the same content we showed with racial and socioeconomic disposition. And then results of the referendum, same presentation. Really the analysis is the same as well for the second petition. And then the recommendation is the exact same. So.
Questions from the board? I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. Right, that concludes the business for this evening. Before we go into our workshop, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. All right, we are back from our recess. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to move into our first workshop this evening on AGR data review. And we have our AGR data experts here with us this evening. So any preamble for you, Dr. Anderson?
No preamble, we're gonna get right into it.
Okay.
Go start us off.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, good evening, board. I'm Keith Ruffalo. I'm the coordinator of elementary instruction. With me are Corey Sack, our data specialist and our manager of student supports.
Can you hold on just a moment? I'm sorry. Like I can't hear what's going on.
That's what he said. I can't do it anymore. I shrank.
I broke it. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm Keith Ruffalo, the coordinator of elementary instruction. And then with me is Corey Sacker, data specialist and manager of student supports, Dr. Becky Grease. I'll kind of lead the presentation, and if any questions or things, because they kind of own some of the work too, but they can be directed to them as well. Okay. All right. So I want to do our annual report of our achievement gap reduction grant, and just show you some mid-year data around that. And then along with some recommendations. I had reviewed last year's presentation, so I want to give you updates on where some of the strategies and things are, that, and then some next steps as well. Quick review about what the Achievement Gap Reduction Grant is, which AGR, I'll use that language, like replace the SAGE program at the end of 2017 school year, and the goal of it is to reduce that achievement gap between our low-income students across our system as it relates to their peers. So just one strategy for that. And then here's the timeline, just a quick review of the process throughout the year to keep to have us awarded the grant. We're on bullet points 2 and 3, updating with our fast bridge data now, and so we report to the board before March 1st. And then how our AGR funds are allocated. This is a quick snapshot of that. So about $2,500 per pupil, which leads to about just under 3 million for the grant total. And it's funded based on selected strategies. We can use that for instructional coaching, maintaining 18:1 or 32 classroom size or class ratios, or 1-to-1 tutoring. Currently, West Dallas, West Milwaukee, we use all 3 strategies to impact student learning in grades K-3. And this is just a quick snapshot of per school and what grade levels and how many AGR classrooms that are serviced. And then this is what I was talking about before. I like I said, I watched kind of like the updates we were given last year, so I want to give you the current state of that. So current steps was one of them that was referenced was our year 1 implementation of HMH into math at the elementary level. And so I wanted to just give you an update, like continuing that work in year 2. As coordinator, I was tasked with putting together a year 2 professional learning plan. That's a snip of like what you see here for professional development. How it connects to AGR and coaching, as our coaches receive that training as part of that. But ultimately, so they can give good feedback, coaching and feedback support to our teachers. And some of the things that we focus on are instructional framework, instructional planning, and then use of our technology tool Waggle. That's like a personalized learning tool within HMH year 2. I'll talk more about that later, but I just want to give you a quick update that we're continuing that work. And then also another step as it impacts our coaches who are part of our AGR funding is our state administrator organization, ASA. previous coaches and principals are trained in at the ASA Impactful Coaching Academy. I would continue that every time we onboard a new coach. So some new coaches and even myself got to participate in this training this year. Really great to be a part of that, to just keep working on deepening knowledge of coaching practice so we can move the practice of our teachers to get to kids. And then another thing that was brought up last year was you guys were in like in the planning phase of the Early Literacy Act 20 requirements. And so we've come to like play that out this year, and all the like instructional coaches and reading specialists were trained in under the LETTERS program. And then that training was built out for this school year and next school year on our professional development days to build the capacity of our teachers. So like train the trainer model. And that's just a quick blurb of like what the early literacy strategies that they're learning about that they can use with our staff. And then our goal was, we use FastBridge to determine this, but our goal was to decrease the number of students in that high risk category by 10%, as measured by FastBridge reading A, reading, and A math. And we give that assessment 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. So this is just like a mid-year first 2 data points for that. So here linked is in the presentation is like a full data chart of our district data, breakdown by kindergarten, first, second, third, because that's like where the grant goes. But for the purposes of tonight, I kind of summarize the data for the mid-year for this part. So ultimately, in A reading, we did a change in percentage of 3%. We want to get to 10%, and so we're working towards that. And then in math, we want to hit 10%, and we've already that decreased and it already exceeded that. And we want to keep that going. So the next couple of slides talk about like, okay, so what are some like immediate steps we're going to take moving forward in reading and math to like increase that and continue. So for reading, the immediate step is that implementation of, we did like a screening plan to like determine students below the 29th percentile as it was like, as per the Act 20 requirements, and Ames Web for K3 and FastBridge 4-5. And those students would have, if they tested below that, our personal reading plan where they target a skill and then like proactively teach that skill and progress monitor to make improvements. So that's one strategy, like immediate step. Second is around math. I talked about like I developed a professional learning plan, and we just wrapped up that series or those rounds of professional learning with staff. So we started instructional framework, then moved on to assessment planning and use, and then Waggle integration. So that's kind of where we just left off the other week on February 10th and 11th. So the vision moving for the rest of the year is continue to build leadership and coach capacity with our HMH coach. Some virtual sessions we have part of our contract. And then for staff training using teacher success pathways, which are like self-directed learning modules as part of the HMH curriculum, with coaching follow-up from their coaches in their collaborative team meetings focus on that. And then a little longer term steps that we want to start to implement system-wide. A lot of things are happening in pockets, but we really want to systemize this to make sure that the coaches and our specialists as like part of this grant are really like targeted use and support. So implementing our district-wide structures for our equitable multi-level systems support, or you will hear EMLSS, and there's the DPI's visual of what that model is. And ultimately what it is a way to create the conditions in a school day where when the students need more time and support, or they need extension in their learning, that we have that built into the school day. And so the next couple of slides talk about some like little longer term planning we're doing as a leadership and learning team to ensure that happens for all kids. So number one, master schedule update. So as we look to 24, 25, 26, we'll build in what I need or win block times to elementary and secondary master schedules. And in the win block time, that's where students can receive more time and support if the data is telling them that, or extension in their learning as well if they've already like mastered content. So this is an elementary example of that, where I've highlighted like the win blocks for ELA and for math. And then also like their universal blocks around that. So they kind of build on each other. So that's one longer term strategy. Second is teacher collaboration time. So to make those win blocks and universal instruction blocks highly effective, We need to ensure that like there's grade level team planning time every day built into the school day. So teachers aren't going outside their contractual hours to figure out things, and they're collaborating, that they're instructional planning, reviewing assessment data, planning instructional delivery for students, and then that job embedded professional development. And what you'll see here, I mean, whether they need universal, targeted, or intensive support. And the connection I'm trying to make here with the arrows is like from collaborate, you'll see a direct connection from the collaboration time that happens here to the win blocks and to our universal instruction for all kids. So you'll see a direct correlation between that. So we're gonna do some learning around that, how to have, like make those collaboration times. At the elementary level, they'd have a collaboration time around ELA, math, and ideally SEL and like behavior as well, to solve problems at the grade level, so that they can be really intentional with that. Another foreshadow is for some leadership capacity building, so our principals and coaches around, so how do we make those two things, teacher collaboration and like that responsive time in the school day really impactful, is we will do some professional, like a learning leadership institute for 4 days in June. And that will be focused on the books, Learning by Doing and Taking Action. Learning by Doing is like professional learning community work. How do you structure collaborative teams in highly effective ways to ensure that all students are getting what they need? And then Taking Action is that creating those school-wide and team-wide systems that we know how to respond when students are learning or they're not learning. And so that's some work we'll do later this spring. I'm sorry, in the summer with our coaches and leadership. So kind of back to who is like part of AGR, it's our coaches and our reading specialists, but they're all part of the bigger picture that like help like support all the kids. So, and then I will give you an update in July. Did we meet our 10% goal or not? Right now, I said like we're working towards that with 8 reading, and then we've already kind of got there with math. We want to keep that going. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. So,
Ms. Kaiser?
I'm seeing significant concerns with like Jefferson of like number of kids that are not moving out of high risk and actually it's being added into high risk. Is that with our special ed numbers being what they are, when it comes to support staff and EAs, is that an issue happening at Jefferson?
I think that's a different issue. I think what he tried to allude to is that we really have to do a lot of work around interventions and how are we supporting kids who are not performing on grade level at the particular time or not performing at a certain level that we expect. That's the work that we're really having to invest in and how we are intervening in kids. That's where the win time is going to come in at, where there's no doubt if you go from Pershing and getting your car and go to Walker, we're using the same system. Yeah. And it's not that this school is doing it this way and not doing something, but we're doing some things district wide. I think that's what we're lacking right now. And that's what we're having to build. I think if you go to some schools, they're doing a very good job of creating those interventions. In some pockets, not so well and not effective enough. I think that's more of the problem, to be honest with you. And it's been a concern of mine. I'll be honest with you, since November. I've been on this kick, and I think came out when I was talking to Ms. Carr in our 101. That's a concern. That if we have kids who are identified as tier 3, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to special education. We have to put things in place to make sure that they don't. And what are those things? And that's been what we're trying to address right now as to how to reduce our tier 3 numbers. And so we don't have to go to a referral process. So that's what we're trying to strengthen, to be honest with you. Okay. And that's the bulk of the work. That's why that Leadership Institute that we're doing in June is targeted. So it's going to be 2 sections of it. It's going to be the first 2 days. It's going to be structured around PLC work. And the last 2 days is going to be around RTI work. Some of you may have been around in the district say, well, that's nothing new. For some reason, it kind of went away. I know Ms. Carr, picking on her, she told me a while back, we've already done this before. We've done this for years. For some reason, for the last, it's kind of gone away from into a different direction. So we have to bring it back to what works.
I would add to that too. So part of the thing I did say with the master schedule work is like using the master schedule as a tool for instruction and planning with like case managers in mind, our MLL teachers, our reading specialists. How do we use them at the highest level at the right time of the school day, and building a schedule that allows them to do that? And so our case managers can like co-plan to go serve with our classroom teachers and really make that crystal clear to address. Yeah.
I guess I'm just confusing how my school does it, because we have a dedicated 30-minute block of intervention where we have kids who go see interventionists. And then the rest stay with us, and those of us who stay with the kids in the classroom who are at tier 2 identified and higher, we do our, I wrote my PLC goal for cycle 2 right now today. So I mean, I was just kind of like in my head.
So something similar.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about a 30-minute time. It doesn't necessarily mean that those kids will be leaving.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of push-in. It could also be that 30-minute time where the teachers are having the opportunity to work on small groups with the students who are struggling the most. But I will say this too, because we call it win time, we don't call it intervention time.
Sure.
It's win time because we're also focusing on those kids who already understand, and how do we expand their learning. That's where the project-based learning is really gonna get a boost, because those kids will have the opportunity for GT as well to expand on their thinking and to do the projects, more creative stuff. That's the thinking, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're not system-wide and having that embedded time.
Okay.
And one of the things we're trying to do as we're building these schedules is make sure that across grade level teams, they have the same so that they can make decisions together as a team collaboratively, but the specialist can then push in during that time.
Gotcha.
So we're not pulling out, keeping kids, you know, for the most part with their peers. Back to that whole, we don't want to pull kids out, make them feel any kind of way. It's just about giving them what they need, depending on whether it's some sort of targeted instruction or some sort of stretch or, you know,
Other questions? Mr. Burns?
Could you go back a couple of slides to the feedback?
Which one?
I think one more. No, one more still. Still going back, sorry. Right there.
Yep.
Okay, so with the AGR, there's specialized training to become a coach for doing AGR? Is that what I'm understanding? Or is like what training is going into doing like as you're coaching, as you're doing these things to help build these supports up? Because it sounds like it's almost a separate group of instruction compared to what we do for other interventions and other kinds of things that we're doing. Is it actually separate?
So do you mean like what training coaches get to like deliver this?
Yeah.
So yeah, part of it does go back to impactful coaching. Like this training, but then addition, Dr. Grease works with our instructional coaches like once a month on to like continue to build out our coaching practices with that. And so to answer that, like, what does that mean as we move forward? Like to design their collaborative team meetings in a way that they like can address all learners' needs. Is that?
Yeah, I guess kind of, but there is some specialized piece that's helping focus on the gap reduction, right? That's kind of the point of this, is we have this focus for doing that. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, yep, and that's actually like the training on like the response to intervention, the RTI, like drilling down what do kids needs, and like in addition to like the reading plans and like all those supports, I guess.
The bulk of the work for in the AGR situation is you have smaller class sizes where you are working on the specific needs of kids in the smallest setting possible. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about the different strategies we're implementing going forward. We're looking at not only the AGR class sizes, but also what types of interventions are we providing, so we can be prescriptive in the supports that we provide for every kid. And sort of some of the prescriptive things that we're doing are these plans.
Mm-hmm.
So the reading plan really digs down for any kid who scores, I think it's 29, is that right? 29, and our number actually is a little higher than what the state requirement is. State requirement is 25. So we've kind of, you know, so we can get more kids involved in it. So those are all the efforts, but the coaching, I think he put that in there to talk about the types of supports that we're providing, so to train these people so they can work with teachers to become better teachers. That's where he.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what I've got. But the other part is that if we're putting in the extra time to coach our coaches, to train them to be able to train our teachers, one of the things that we have in here is focused feedback from building principals. Are the principals being trained in the same consistency as our coaches so that they can provide feedback that is actually focused on the AGR component? Because otherwise, if you look at it, if you're not getting that, you look at, well, this class is normally, I would say these things and these things, versus if you have that smaller class size, we have different interventions that you're using, you have that prescriptive component. And so is the feedback as valuable if they're not necessarily giving feedback from the AGR standpoint versus the standard classroom?
So I think the feedback generally is what's going to be how can we provide the best instruction for teachers, for our kids, and then how can we provide the best feedback that's going to get the best results for kids, regardless of what type of class you're in. You're going to get the same background or same target of feedback, and that doesn't change whether it's a non-AGR or AGR class. That's the same. I think the AGR component though is really focused on more of those kids in a smaller class setting, and then how can we make this as prescriptive as possible, individualized as possible for those kids? That's some of the efforts that we're looking at, and that's with compliance with the Act 20 that's required, and also now with the HMH stuff that we're doing, really just trying to really dig down and dig a little deeper to support the individual needs of kids. It's almost like all of our kids who are scoring at a certain level that's not high enough are basically getting sort of like an IEP of sorts. So we're individualizing what their needs. So we identify what they are, and then we're identifying what the supports are needed for those kids. That's where the AGR component comes in. Not necessarily, I don't want you to really conflate the coaching necessarily, that there's a big difference. It's really not a big difference with that component. What the difference is how we address and support the kids. That's the difference.
If I can add, so part of our.
Listen, I need you to buy a microphone, sorry.
Part of our continuous improvement work through SAIL as a district leadership is getting at what you're speaking to, which is building collective capacity and collaboration between coaches and principals and APs. But we talk a lot, especially at the elementary level, of like everyone needs to step into their instructional leadership so that coaches are getting targeted feedback from their principals, and it's useful and helpful, grows their practice, while also knowing that our coaches do tend to bring in instructional expertise into the space. So it's like they often build up our principals, but another way that we build up the whole system is through instructional routes. So this morning we were at Irving again. I know Joe, you've joined us for some. Anyone is welcome to join those. Amy, I think you've been in, Jane. So those provide an opportunity to like kind of level up the whole system where we're seeing like what are the strong practices, and every time we're stepping outside a classroom, everyone can point to like this is the move I would make to coach that teacher, and there's an intense level of collaboration happening across our system. So I think those are some ways that everyone is being is able to provide that feedback. Like I'm seeing similar things to what Joanna would coach a principal or a deeper learning coach around.
And just to expound on that, like today, the first question I ask is, of the team, what do you see? What are you seeing? And I'm talking to the team at that particular school. What do you see? And the last thing I ask is, what do you need from us? Like we told you everything that we give us feedback. What do you need from us to make you more successful as a school? So it's almost, we want to identify basically what the current state is, what you're doing here, how can we make it better, or how can we support the work that, so those are kind of just walking you through sort of like the feedback that we give to our principals in our PLC.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm asking because I get that feedback can be feedback, but if you're giving feedback to someone who's socioeconomically disadvantaged compared to somebody who's not, they hear it differently. And so just kind of as an example, so a principal that isn't necessarily trained the same way as the coach isn't seeing that things the same way. They may give feedback with a different angle or perception because of what they're seeing. So they see a smaller class sizes. Why aren't my other classes using this piece versus the other? And so it's just kind of seeing how things are transitioning and moving through. And so it's just the reason I wanted to know is to make sure that they are giving that feedback, because as much as the coaches are great, when you're coming to as a teacher, that information that you get from your principal can be quite powerful, right? And so we want to make sure that that's consistent and it is from the right lens, I guess. So because they'll hear it differently based on what they're doing. But that was why I was asking, seeing that feedback and then how we were talking about the training. But I do appreciate that we're building that structure as well on the sales side. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting, right? Because we talk about, like, with students, we have them collaborating, and we talk about with coaches, and we can collaborate, but we need a collective advocacy on our full leadership team, including our district team, to be able to all speak to the work that we're doing. And I would say also, to Dr. Robinson's point, like, we're defining right now, like, across our entire system, what we would say is high quality instruction, so that it doesn't matter, right, who you're serving. And I mean, across our schools, we serve a similar population, but that you're ensuring that you're holding like really high expectations, that teachers are getting really strong feedback specific to them, but also it's based in research-based practices. So those are some of the things that we are working for, that calibration consistency that you bring up.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So the AGR dollars, so our classrooms are all the same, regardless if they're an AGR classroom or not, for how many students are in the classroom. The AGR dollars are used to basically keep the total class size or the average class sizes at the level that we have set them at.
Correct.
It's not like, well, this
No.
classroom.
No, so there are designated teachers
Uh-huh.
that are assigned to classrooms that are identified as AGR. And if you could go to that table that shows the number of AGR classrooms,
Right.
right? So for example, at Irving, there's 2 AGR classrooms. So those classrooms have a guaranteed 18-to-1 or less in them,
Uh-huh.
which means sometimes across the first grade, then you might have another class that has 22, which is still within our like normal band for first grade. So it doesn't mean that all the classrooms are gonna have necessarily a reduced number, but we work really hard to balance that.
Mhm.
And that's where it's a whole puzzle, figuring out staffing with AGR, and ensuring like teacher collaboration as well.
So are you putting specific students in those
How do you
smaller
determine
classrooms?
Yes, yes and no. I mean, we don't also want to, we want to make sure that classes are distributed
Uh-huh.
equitably.
Yeah.
So we're not putting like all multilingual students in one classroom together, or all students with disabilities in one classroom together, because research says that that is also not, it has the reverse impact on student outcomes and well-being. So it's strategically spread out.
Yeah, you wouldn't have an AGR class that has all of the kids who are at high risk. That would not happen.
So let's look at like Irving. I know Irving doesn't have just one first grader, like I guess, how do you determine like how many they get, like each school gets, or like how many classrooms you choose for? Like, I mean, obviously I would guess based on some income stuff, obviously, because Horace Mann's got more classrooms versus like,
Do you wanna go back?
although Walker's rather large and it's, like.
The one that says how many-
Yep.
So
It is.
this slide right here, so DPI allocates $2,571 per pupil that is economically disadvantaged. So those buildings that have those higher percentages get more of that funding, and that's why certain buildings have more of those classrooms. Then we work with the principals and like the principal coaches to determine where that makes sense, not only because of their enrollment, but where it makes sense instructionally.
But if you look at in the past, I know when we had a conversation with DPI about 2 weeks ago, Walker, with the closing of Madison, their numbers increased significantly, for example. So,
Yep.
so now Walker's now at the same level with the number of students than other schools. That would be just an example of how it shifts, population shifts.
So the scheduling piece, is that only for the AGR classrooms? That's not for all classrooms?
It's for all classrooms.
So I guess I'm failing this delineation here as far as, so some classrooms are 18 or lower. Other ones might be higher, but still within the 22, or I thought ours was, it's 20 for
18-to-1.
What's that? 18 to 1,
18 to 1.
right?
Is to like meet this criteria.
That's for AGR.
Yeah, for AGR,
Yes,
right?
so we have different thresholds.
I thought it was 20 for up to, what's it, kindergarten, 4K in kindergarten?
Yep, and then I believe it goes
22,
to 22,
yeah,
then
and
it
then
goes to like
24.
24 and then 26 for upper elementary, but AGR doesn't pertain to fourth
Right,
grade,
right.
right? Just K through third. So then our other classrooms stay within those bands, and that's why we are really strategic with, if you have 2 classrooms, you need to make sure, we've been working really hard to make sure our teachers still have collaboration with their peers during the day, right? As well as for the collaborative planning time. And that we're keeping true to those numbers as required by the grant.
So the schedule, if you're getting caught up on the scheduling, it's not just an AGR strategy. Okay, it's a strategy to to create a professional learning communities within our school. That when we have time specific teachers, administrators, as well as coaches to sit down and develop some high quality lessons, look at data. There's just more collaboration time that's being built with that, but we're also creating it sort of like backwards, where you build it around your special education population, your MLL population. You build it that way strategically first. When you build a master schedule, you need to start with your most troubled or significant population when it comes to need. So that's the way we're looking at building our schedules on.
And no, I think I can answer, like, of building the master schedules, while it's like, we can use, so part of the strategy is instructional coaching and one-to-one tutoring. So how we can like even more effectively use our coaches and like reading specialists to target those win blocks or the universal blocks of instruction. But they can also attend collaboration time with their teams. So like the coach will be in the collaborative team meeting with the grade level team teachers, the reading specialists, and like having a master schedule that lays it out there, like, oh, like, yep, we need to like target first grade at Jefferson or whatever it may be in this area. Let's like flood the support there. So it's like connection, but like it's just more intentional use of our coaches and our reading specialists as relates to this. Now, if they have 18-1, that's part of it too. But like I said, just more intentional with the staff that we have and how do we use them in the most effective way.
So do you move students at any time during the year based on these testing results for students who need more, or when they're in that class, they're in that class? Because I have to be frank, like AGR for me was money that was used to keep class sizes down. Not that there was specific classes that were 18 or lower for sure. And then the other classes were higher because of that. So that was never clearly explained to me. And I'm in year 8. So I think that from my perspective, you know, that's why I'm asking what students are getting put in that spot, what students are getting and what students aren't. Because conceivably, the students in the 18 or lower are getting an advantage over the students who are not in the 18 or lower. And so how are you picking those students?
Yeah.
How is that
That's a good
determined?
question. Yeah.
How is that figured out? Say, you're going here, you're not. What is the criteria?
Yeah, I don't think there's any particular criteria, because in telling you can put 18 kids in one class. You can have a smaller class, but if you have 18 kids who are all struggling.
I'm not saying that's how it should be.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is though, how is this effective if there's not a process to do this? How is it more effective if it's randomly putting kids and some are 18 and some aren't? How is that more effective? How is this doing what it's supposed to do?
It was always my understanding that we shifted our thinking with it when we went to AGR, in that we weren't really putting the monies towards the 18-1, but it was we put the monies in instructional coaching. So we're about instructional coaches, and everybody's getting the instruction. And so what the model, the big overview is that what's shifted is that every single adult wraps around and hears the same thing. And so if you're the reading specialist, if you're the SEL, if you're whatever you do, you meet and you say, okay, we're going to focus on these kids because according to these test scores, they've got a weak area. So you flood that room with lots and lots of support. because everybody's hearing, they're saying these kids, so it doesn't matter if there aren't any AGR classrooms per se. It's my understanding. They're what it basically is now, and the model will be, we give, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to wrap my head around it too. Everyone gets universal tier 1 instruction, good quality instruction, grade level instruction, everyone. And then after that, then you look and see what kids might need a little bit. And then that's why you're instilling the win, because then you're looking during that time to hone in, and every adult in the building, including the principal, which is lovely because they're that leader. They're there not just watching, they're there in the trenches to give feedback. And so they all wrap around and they all help during that win time. And then they go back and then they say, how do we do? And then that's that, the plan, do, model, right? I mean, so that's what's happening. And I don't think they ever say, oh, this is an AGR classroom with 18-1. I don't think that's even an issue.
So, yes, to clarify, as part of the grant, that is one of the strategies. So there are classrooms that have to remain at 18-1. Right. But as you've noticed, the strategies we're using, another core strategy from the state that we choose is to focus on instructional coaching. And AGR allows us to have instructional coaches in every single one of our elementary schools. And that is not the case for all districts, that they have instructional coaches dedicated in every single building. So that is how we are choosing to use those funds. And if you notice, then all of our strategies that Keith has laid out and this team and we work on are to improve instruction across our K-3 system. So Jane is correct, and that in AGR classrooms, we're not doing different in those classrooms. We are building the collective capacity across K-3 through all of our instructional coaches, getting training and support, collaborating with our leaders, and then directly coaching and supporting our teachers. So it's a system-wide approach. And one of the strategies that we do use, because it does reduce class sizes, you're correct, it does reduce class sizes overall across the system, to have AGR, because it increases the number of teachers we have allowed to us. So it's having that effect, but that's, as research would say, like having a smaller class size is not the greatest indicator of success for students. It is the efficacy, the collective efficacy of teachers. And that's what we're trying to build through all the strategies that we've named.
So the instructional coaching makes sense to me because that is system wide.
Mm-hmm.
The 18-1, 30-2 makes less sense to me. It's required. But thank you. So the 18-1, my understanding was we could pick one or all of these strategies with the grant. It wasn't an all or nothing. You didn't have to do everything. You could say, I want the money to go to instructional coaching only. I want the money to go to maintaining 18-1 or 32 only. Or I'm going to do it for tutoring only. Or we can do all of them. Right? So if you're telling me, so 18-1 is not a requirement of the grant, only if we choose it to be a requirement of the grant, we pick and say, this is what we want to do. If instructional coaching is the best way to do it, why don't we just put it all to that, or that and tutoring? Instead of saying, oh, we have to maintain 18-1. Because what I'm hearing is that instructional coaching seems to be the bell of the ball. The 18-1 is something we're doing just because we picked at one time that we wanted to do that. And I don't know how often, is it a 5-year grant? How often that we have to do it? So I thought it was a 5 year.
Okay, yeah, I'm not clear on that. I would say, I think the argument for why we would want the 18-1 or a combination of that with instructional coaching and tutoring is we're seeing nationally and locally the challenges we're having with students in early literacy. And so it is a strategy to be able to provide more personalized instruction and support for students in the early years, knowing that if they are not proficient in reading, once they reach 3rd grade, their trajectory for graduation is less, right? So that's like what the national studies have shown us, like 3rd grade for reading is such a critical time. And so I would argue keeping that as a strategy does allow us to have more adults in our classrooms directly supporting students around those early literacy skills as an example, as well as math, obviously. But I think it is a combination strategy. I mean, we can look, right, and see is that working, but I would argue that it is to have a multifaceted approach.
I'm not saying it, no, I'm not just here telling you it's wrong.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to understand and comprehend is, what is it doing? And what I'm hearing majority of is the coaching is doing most of the doing. The 18-1 is doing less of it. I will never sit here and argue against lower class sizes. What I was here and say is they all should be 18-1. And we're doing the coaching. That's what I would argue. I don't like the pick and choose. That's what I don't like, because there doesn't seem to be a real process for the pick and choose. And if you're getting the coaching and you're getting the 18-1, I think those students then would have a leg up to the classes that don't. And that's where I'm stuck on that. So I'm not saying you're doing it wrong. I need to understand the process for why this is done the way it's being done. And if it's really instructional coaching, let's just do that. And then try to find the funds to be able to do 18-1 for everybody. Because I agree that it's better. I think it'd be better. No one's going to argue against that. But I know the money is the problem.
Right, because how the grant is set up to.
More kids,
I know.
more teachers.
I know.
Yeah.
And we gotta have the space for it.
Yes.
If we have extra classrooms now that we're splitting up. Any other questions? Was there more? No, good. All right, so you guys can just- Thank you. Thank you so much. For
Thank
coming
you,
in.
thank you.
Thank you.
Your work.
All right, we'll move on to 12.2. Which has a number. You just going all through these one after the other, Aaron? The 12.21, 22, and 23, and 24? You're going to call those individually.
Are all the parts in the.
Second Friday.
all together, yeah.
They're all together. Okay,
Sorry.
so we're gonna hear all four of these at once. Ish. Or in order.
Yeah, I'll take one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wait for this to dock up here. Oh, here we go.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you.
So running on E a little bit here, so I apologize. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask them as we go here. Let's we get. So I'll just kind of give the preamble as Brandon gets this set up. So this is the first meeting of the budget cycle, budget calendar that's board approved every year in December. This really, it changes every year because every other year we flip between a biennial budget cycle and not. This is the year we're entering a biennial budget cycle where revenue is unknown. So a lot of what we'll talk about tonight is advocacy and kind of what everyone's asking for and why. We'll hit on some projected enrollment pieces here and some staffing as well.
Aaron.
So while that's going around, maybe I'll pass these out. Want to just take one and hand one down? Yeah, more. Kind of passing out a draft advocacy resolution. You can feel free to look at it as we go, but I just wanted to get a space to formalize kind of what I think we should be asking for as an organization, as an administration, a school board. And here we go. Now we're up online. So I'll get to this at the end. Feel free to look at it now, but I'll speak to it directly at the end here. So a couple things I want to hit on here. This is the first meeting of the budget calendar. We'll go through this quick because some of this you guys have seen before. So we'll talk about membership and enrollment, talk about the fiscal impact, and we'll just kind of jump through each of these aspects here. So enrollment and membership, two different numbers, two different definitions, but two different things. So membership is the students we're actually paid for. Those are resident kids that both go to our schools and live in our boundaries, but may open and roll out, right? That's a member. That's a member of organization. Enrollment is what we staff on, right? We staff on kids in schools here. Yeah, so you kind of heard about through the AGR presentation. The 5-year projection, we discussed this at the last fiscal workshop we had related to open enrollment, so I won't go through this, but again, we're kind of in the outskirts of declining enrollment here. And so you can see here on this slide, this shows that our enrollment from this year, third Friday, to next year projected third Friday is a reduction of 155 students. And of that, 117 is really our high schools. That's because if you go back to this slide in yellow, you can see we have 3 grades currently, 10th, 11th, and 12th, all in the 600s. Our 9th grade's at 500, right? Every grade below that is in the high 4s, mid 4s. So the new norm at high school is likely going to be around 490, 500, and you have grades exiting at 600. So you'll see that for a few more years, 2 more years, and then we'll likely have pretty flat enrollment, maybe +10, -20. It'll just range like that. So the fluctuation in staff is just like some years, some schools have, the 4K numbers are coming in higher at this school, and so you might see a bad teacher here and a lose teacher. You kind of might see that. The years of big fiscal reductions are gone. And I say reductions, I mean reallocations. We haven't reduced teachers in a long time. We've reallocated, meaning we need you, we just don't need you here, right? So important to note that. This is kind of a nice slide to show that. If you look at this table here, it shows you the 600s are a little bit of an anomaly now, right? So as those phase out, that regression line, it looks pretty good. So people say, well, how do you know you're not going to lose more kids? We have 8 years of data to show we're going to live in the 400s. That's real data, not projections. So we've been pretty good on projecting enrollment. It works really well with our budget. We've talked about that with the audit, so it's been successful. This is a head count. This shows how enrollment and membership play. So again, districts, as they decline in enrollment, receive a 3-year average of the prior year for funding. So if you decline in enrollment, you actually get paid for more kids than you have, right? The corollary is true too. If you have 7,000, then 8,000, then 9,000, 3-year average is 8,000. But that year you had 9, you get paid for 8, right? So when you increase in enrollment, there's a lag in getting funded too. So as we flatten out an enrollment, it's important to right size staff, because when you right size staff with revenue, that's how you can maintain balanced budgets. So this kind of shows that picture. You can see here over 4 to 5 years, the loss of 400 students. So you might say, where'd all the revenue go? Well, we've offset it with reducing expenses slowly. And that's what the idea of declining enrollment exemptions are. We're going to give you more money in the short term to help you reduce your expenses long term, right? So if you do that slowly, you can kind of manage that and not have that be a huge shock to the organization. That's kind of what we try to do, along with trying to make commitments from instructional perspectives as well about how can you do that and maintain an adequate level of programming, which is sufficient for our kids. So the revenue limit formula, again, you guys know this: membership times your per pupil equals revenue limit authority. That's why our per pupil count is so important. And then the biennial budget is what sets the amount you get per kid, the increase to that number. So you kind of see here, that was our membership this past year. That's the 3-year average. That's the 11,403 is what we got this past year, assuming we'll get the 325, which is the governor's required increase, plus the transfer of service. That gets you to 11,763 with a total revenue limit authority of 87 million roughly. This is kind of the open enrollment numbers. You guys know these. We approved these end of January, 156 new open enrollment seats. Of that, about 35 are current students on waivers in our schools. So 121 really new seats. And we usually get an acceptance rate in the 50%. So we might get, another 80, 90 kids. That's just kind of what we've been trending at. Growth of the districts here. So again, we use projected enrollment, the section size to determine how many staff we need by school. We use the class size matrix, which we just talked about, both presentations. And then really we align our staffing with projections. And what do we use? We forecast enrollment. Connie's working through course requests at the high school. So our enrollments at elementary, the staffing's pretty much done. She's working through shared staff, art, music, FIAD, that's getting worked out right now. Certainly the schedule that Keith and Becky and Alyssa discussed is getting worked out, that may have some implications there. Then the work really now, Connie's working on Hale Central Dottke. How many kids are requesting classes in foods and CTE, and how does that map work? You got to add a CT teacher, you got to reduce the Spanish. Like, how does that work? So that's being done now, and then that'll be communicated to the principals and the teams here in about a few weeks. So I'm looking at that tomorrow with her, and then you start looking at, you might run AP Euro at 30, but you're not running a bio class at 30. You're running that at 23. And then you got to go, well, how many kids typically drop honors bio? Typically it's 1 or 2. So there's a lot of considerations that go into that, because we certainly don't want algebra 1 showing up with 31 kids. That's a really difficult, we want that to be the lower size. So the high school average is 27, but your APs might run at, 30, your Phi-Ed's probably at 30, but you might run your art at 24. I mean, there's just considerations, labs, things like that. So we look at that, and then we try to make reasonable predictions based on prior year data to make sure that the schools, when the kids show up, it works, right? So the whole picture looks at, this is a big screen, but across all the schools, it's a reallocation of 16 staff. And you can kind of see by building. A lot of our elementaries are pretty consistent. The 2 elementaries are Jefferson, and really that's because Jefferson's enrollment projected this year was 436. We actually only had about 400 kids come this year, so it's that was one that we were a little off on. And then their projection with a high 5th grade, low 4K is 371. So the net difference, 436 and 371, is about 60 kids, 2 staff, right? You gotta get the idea. Walker is another one. They're reducing a teacher. Their 4K numbers came in real low this year. So you can see their average is at 20 next year, because I'm not sure it's going to hold true. That 27 kids is an anomaly at Walker. So we're not sure it's going to happen. That might come in a little higher. So we certainly don't want to reallocate a teacher that wants to be there if that happens. So there's some considerations. So you can see kind of to the AGR comment is the building average. A lot of these elementaries are nowhere near 22, but then if you attribute the AGR in yellow, you can see most are in the the low 21s. Some are a little bit lower, depending on some of those considerations that are made. But the bulk of the reduction are at the high school. FLW is going to lose a few because remember the Jefferson students last year, the Jefferson kids phasing out of FLW, now going to West. So a lot of those teachers are going to shift. This is the last year of that. And beyond that, the high schools represent that because they're the bulk of the enrollment loss. So any questions on that? That's a lot at once. Any questions that make sense though? I'll keep going. You come back to it if you have questions. So okay, state budget. We'll shift to this now. So we're in year 1, going into year 1 of the biennial. We really don't know a ton. I know you guys are hearing a lot too. I'm hearing a lot unknowns. We really find out I would say we have a decent idea of what stuff's going to look like. Throw a dartboard mid-April, early May of kind of what are the other side of the branch. Let's be willing to do. That's kind of where you go. What's worst case? What's best case? And start working your way back. So that's really that. So I thought I'd go, what are the different agencies asking for? So DPI, we'll start with that. DPI is asking for $425 per kid in fiscal year 26. And then they want to index that in future years, a part of the budget. So, I think 425 might be realistic. Indexing into inflation would be great. I don't know how practical that is. The low revenue ceiling one's interesting to me because it's kind of an irrelevant point because the low revenue ceiling was at 11,000 2 years ago. So now take the 325. Now you're at 11,325 is the new low revenue ceiling. So when DPI asks for 425, add them together here. 11,000 plus 325 is 11,325 plus 425. Now you're at 11,750. So they say move the low revenue ceiling to 11,700. You're already above it. It's kind of an odd request in my opinion. Now the second year, maybe that's the point of moving it to 12,004 because that would be some significant movement for us. That'd be great. Special ed, that's been a continued echo chamber, I think, from every group. I would really hope there's more support this biennial for doing that because, similar to the conversation you just had, special education numbers are going up across the state at unprecedented rates. And where that's from, not sure. I'm sure you could draw a line to different things. Categorically, and then fully funding meals, that seems to be a pretty unilateral ask across all the groups. The governor's ask, his some per pupil increases about 334. So he's not looking to ask for more than's already guaranteed. I think that's probably a strategy on his end, not to bring that, a sour wound maybe there. But he is asking for the low revenue ceiling to get a bump. That would provide some significant revenue for us because again, we're low revenue, right? And our referendum recurring is an exemption next year. So after that, it gets added to our per pupil. So it's important to note that should they not increase the revenue ceiling and then do it the following year, that chews up some of the recurring referendum. It's not like on top of that. Okay. The first year it's an exemption. The second year gets added to your per pupil. You follow that? So some districts like Kettle Moraine asked the recurring referendum 2 years ago or 4 years ago. They raised the little revenue ceiling. Stellmacher's like, it's gone because the referendum, the community passed, we would have gotten it anyway now. So when you ask non-recurring, The rub is non-recurring, you only get it for a few years, gotta go back. But it's an exemption the whole time. The recurring, the good is you get it forever, but the bad is they raise low revenue ceiling, it eats up into it. So what would be best for us if they do the low revenue ceiling in year one? Then in year two, it's on top of that for us, which would be good news for us. So a part of your ask you'll see is we are really advocating for that because that'd be significant. And I think it's very bipartisan because what pushed that last biennial was a lot of the Republican legislature members. The conversation sat well of limit the disparities between districts. It's ridiculous. There's districts 18, 19,000 per kid and you're at 10. I mean, that sits well with people, I think. It's a reasonable ask. So I'm hoping that is reasonable. The governor's asking for 60% special ed funding with a plan to get to 90. So that may be more reasonable. And then categorical aids consistent with DPI, fully funding meals. WASDA and WASBO and WASB, a lot of acronyms there. They formalized their ask at Day of the Capitol, which a lot of you are going to. So you guys will hear that coming up and we'll know what that looks like as well. And I'm hoping they all fall close to each other because that's helpful. And then our ask, I think being consistent with some of these groups. So we would really like the low revenue ceiling getting bumped to 12,500 year one. I really don't think that that's unreasonable. I think there might be some partisan support for that. Certainly getting per pupil increases. I think 325 is probably where it lands, but I mean, being out front of like spendable revenue is going to help everybody. The low revenue ceiling, you might think might not help a lot of people, but 80% of districts or 80+% in the advocacy thing here are within an eardrop of that. I think it's 70+%. So when they increase low revenue, it's like you're helping 70% of districts. You're doing this. So the rub with that is always, well, how does that impact the community taxpayer? That's typically where that comes from. You know, not completely, but a lot of that. And then we really like to advocate for special ed funding at 90%. That's be a huge ask for us. This is a nice little table that shows you kind of like what each ask means. So DPI's ask results in about 8.5 million for us next year. Okay. The governor's about 7.1. And then you can see the big one there. Ours is 15. Why? The low revenue ceiling is huge. Okay. And special ed funding make up 13 million. Like if that happened, just one of those happened, I would say significant win for our school district to catch up to a lot of area districts. You guys saw when I presented on the petition, like what even $1,000 can do over time. So it's a significant deal for our district to try to push for that. And I really do feel like people on the other side, you know, special ed funding, low revenue. I mean, I think the per pupil might be off the books now because of people feeling like Governor Evers maybe did something that they didn't support with the ban of white veto. You had a question, Brendan?
I did. I lost my stuff.
Yeah. We can come back to it if you want. But.
Okay.
So getting into what do we know about the budget revenue side? We know we have the operating revenue coming in from the referendum. We pretty much can book the 325. I think there's some legal contests there, but I haven't heard anything with merits yet. A lot of the groups are booking that. The 325 is in statute now for as long as we'll be here. So that's that. Again, this is interesting. It's 33% special education reimbursement, but it's some apportioned or appropriated. So again, they say 33%, but it's based off the prior year's bucket of money. So if last year's dollar, well, all the sped teachers got increases in salaries, right? All that happens, all this transportation. So what ends up happening is the bucket of money is from the prior year. Your current year expenses are reimbursement. So what percent do you actually get? 30% is what districts actually get. That 3% is a big deal. So part of the ask is to make it wholesome. You said 33, it should be 33 the year you get it, not based off the prior year, right? So that's a big deal. That little bit adds up a lot. So that's that. And then really no changes. That's really it. That's what we're going to like build a budget on, real conservative, because I really have no clue what's going to happen in this cycle. I really don't. A lot of things going on up there. Some expense assumptions. Really early, too early to tell projections on health insurance. A couple of months here is that our loss ratio has slightly declined. So 9 or 10% seems reasonable for that, but really early to tell. They say there's a lag in insurance markets where like you're changing a plan. People run to the doctor before you change it, right? So like unknown how that's going to play out. So I'm interested to see that. Dental insurance, we really haven't had an increase. Previously, the transportation, that's the second year and that levels off. So it's the last year having to eat that. Then we're at, really low premiums for a long time. So I think we did a pretty good job with that. And then WRS, that's the employee contribution. What else? 8% in utilities. We were pretty high the last 2 years, and in utilities, outside of personal, which have gone up a lot, I think a lot of you guys can attest that your personal homes, but in more commercial, it hasn't as much, which is surprising. So that's good news. So there's that. CPI and referendum. I'm currently building it off of 9.25. CPI is 2.95. So part of the conversation that we haven't got to yet, where we'll come, which this can change, is the question I have is what's the region going to do on an average? Because if we give CPI 2.95, but everyone gives 3.4, you could just multiply it until we're back in the same conversation about people being underpaid. So the conversation should be, what's the average of what everyone does? If everyone gives 3.0, we should just give that because that's consistent. And then we're going to pick up and gain on the referendum increase. So I think that might be a small shift, not a big one, but I think it's something we should consider. So we'll have to stay in tune on what that looks like. But that's typically, we typically don't seek approval for that until April or May based on what that looks like. So, and then insurance, that's going to be like property liability, workman's comp. That's been 7 to 10 every year. So that's that. So at this point, we're balanced, but again, this is using pretty conservative, I think, revenues. We will likely get one bucket of money from some other place. I don't know what it's going to be yet. So when that happens, that's where conversations start around like, what do district priorities look like? Is it 46? Is it some staffing? Is it, you're talking about a CT per like some of the strategic plan stuff may be coming into play about like what we want it to look like. So that's a conversation we'll certainly have. This is kind of a snapshot to show that some assumptions. And one thing I want to note is the prior year budget dictates the following year's budget. So like it's based off of our current budget that is not actuals yet, right? So like when we get actuals, we usually have some money at the end of the year, okay? So when we roll that over, that's what the new budget's based on. So if there's like $1 million surplus, it's not really $1 million in the green. You follow what I'm saying? Unless it's one-time offsets. So that's that. So pathways, we're going to keep reviewing the reallocation. May 1st is when teachers get reallocated. So the reason we do it late is because people resign and retire. So if I don't got to tell someone you're going to get moved because someone already retired, that's a good conversation not to have, right? So historically, experience doing it late is actually helpful. So and very, very seldom have we had to actually move. I think it was 2 people last year, Terrence, out of 18. So it kind of shows you how it really plays out. So that's good. We'll continue advocacy. We'll get into that in a second. Maximize open enrollment seats. Connie and her team are working through those. That's not closed yet. April 15th is the close date. And then, to me, it's like hot off the press. The earlier you are, the more seats you get. Call letter. You just got to get on. You got to get people in, right? And then I know Dr. Robinson, and we're working on the strategic plan that'll certainly outline some of the budget pieces in the future years. And then we always look at the budgets for departments, schools, and things like that. So we'll continue to do that. And then really, we're just going to keep working on developing the budget. We have steps that we take to start doing that. I think that's probably all I'll say for that. Any questions before I get to the advocacy piece?
That's great. I had a question for both communication and just kind of seeing that difference of
Right here?
$1,000 and what it does over time. That was communicated in our piece, but then also with this and kind of as we are requesting and putting stuff forward, can we expand on that table that you did and also show that? Because the 275 million showing that deficit compared to a district next door. I mean, because that's really what it is. I think is kind of powerful. If we could get something with that, and even if there are other districts around us that have a little bit more and showing that deficit that we face because of that low revenue cap, because like 275 million, that was our referendum 2 years ago. It was, we're in our referendum now. So like, where would we be and where would our constituents be if we had that over the long term?
No, it's a good point. We could talk with Carol and Dr. Robinson how we could format that, but I would agree because that was something that when we were going through the referendum cycle, I think resonated with people about like, we get less. It's hard to argue with that. I felt like that really resonated with people. I don't know if you had a comment, Dr. Robinson, on that.
And I would add maybe even projecting, because things in education turn slow, if we were to project out another 10 years, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Too, for even just one of them. How far do we continue to fall behind?
Sure.
So do 5 years. Yeah, let's do 5 years. That's the life cycle of a legislator.
Sure.
So in 5 years' time, this is how much less we could be. And if we don't get.
We could
It's
work
like-
something into this too. Sometimes boards will issue like a press release.
Yeah.
Something like that. We could do something like that along with anything else. I mean, we could.
These 12-5 are still behind.
Yeah.
For people.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? We'll talk about the advocacy piece. Good.
So I guess shifting, you want to do something, Noah, close the workshop, do we have to do anything to shift into this or?
Well, we have to motion to go into a whole committee of a whole to do all that. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk anything about before that.
Sure, yeah. So I guess in conjunction with the different groups advocating for their things that they think are most important. Given that we're heading to the day at the Capitol soon, for those of you who are attending, I thought this might be a nice one pager to bring with, to like formalize some of the thinking here. Not that it's all encompassing, so there's other things you can advocate for with legislators when you go. But also, I was thinking we could also, the full board could sign this. I have one document I'll ask for. And then we could officially mail this to our local legislators to provide some advocacy. That way, if you do see them, you can go, hey, did you get my letter? I mean, it might be a nice follow-up to a conversation. Advocacy's been an area of conversation at the board about how can we do things. So I was trying to provide a space to do that. But that was kind of the thinking here. I know Noah brought it up. I think Tosa did something similar.
Yeah, so I was sent an email. From Tosa saying this, we passed this. And we would be nice if you guys would pass something similar to try to have a lot of different school districts advocating, kind of rowing in the same direction, if you will. And so if a lot of districts in the area are asking for similar things, it provides, I think, holds more weight when legislatures are considering what they're gonna kind of stand toe to toe with other people and say, no, I need this. This is something that my constituency has shown me that we need and covers multiple districts. And so that's kind of where we're here. So why don't we move into committee of the whole, and then we can have the resolution read, and then we can vote. Okay, so I need a motion and a second to convene committee of the whole.
Second.
I mean, you do roll call for that.
Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Sigich,
Yes.
Ms. Deal,
Yes.
Ms. Lee, Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes. All right, so we're here to consider a resolution that was drafted by Mr. Norris. Mr. Norris, are you gonna read the resolution for us?
Sure, I can pull that up.
And after he reads it, we can have any discussion or questions, and then I would look for a motion after that is completed.
Okay, I don't have the last page, so I'll get to that when it comes back around, but the resolution reads, and I quote, whereas the Wisconsin Department of Administration, DOA, estimates the state of Wisconsin will have a gross general fund balance of approximately $4 billion at the end of the current fiscal year, and this figure does not include the $1.9 billion fund balance in the state's budget stabilization rainy day in quote fund, which continues to be at record level highs. And whereas the school property tax levy as a percentage of personal income tax burden is at 1.5% record low level, down from the peak of 2.81% in 1993. And whereas according to the Wisconsin Public Policy Forum, state's ranking for spending K-12, schools total 3.8% of personal income in 2022, which is down from 3.9% in 2021 and 5.2% in 2000. And whereas the state's ranking in special education spending is in 2022 was 31st, down from 24th, highest in 2021, and 8th highest in 2000, representing a major shift in the single largest area of state and local spending. And whereas approximately 1,293 students of our school of the 6,654 total student population, roughly 19.4% in the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District is identified in need of special education services. And whereas the school districts in high poverty areas are hit the hardest by special education costs, and state government has reimbursed districts for less than 1/3 of their total special education costs over the last decade. And whereas students receiving special education services in the West Dallas West Milwaukee school districts should not be treated differently than students who attend private school choice programs in relation to reimbursement services for services received. And whereas the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District needs adequate resources to support student disabilities to reduce the amount of currently transferred from the general funds to cover the gap between mandated special education costs and state funding. And whereas increases in special education funding provide more predictable state funding that supports all students due to less of a transfer of the general education district's fund. Whereas increasing the low revenue ceiling will provide more sustainable and fair distribution of state funds, addressing disparities in per pupil funding across districts. And whereas nearly 73% of all school districts in Wisconsin receive funding below the state average revenue per member. And whereas spendable dollars from schools are crucial for ensuring equitable access to quality education, enabling districts to meet the diverse needs of their students. Let it be resolved that the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District Board of Education strongly endorses and advocates for the Wisconsin State Legislature to do the following: increase special education funding 90%, raise the low revenue ceiling to $12,500, and provide all public schools with spendable dollars in the form of $425 per student in the first year of the 25-26 state ballot budget. This resolution, pending their approval, reflects the board's commitment to securing equitable and sustainable funding to support the needs of all students and ensure the continued success of public education in Wisconsin.
That's the resolution. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Yeah.
If no questions or comments, I'd look for a motion.
So approved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, that passes. And that's the end of our thing. So I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.